We have a roll call, Madam Clerk.
Veronica Frankel.
Present.
Howard Rosenberg.
Present.
Lisa Ruggiero.
I am present.
Nick Smith. Angela Taylor.
I'm here.
John Mayer.
Here.
Logan Carlson.
Here.
And Barbara McClory. I am present. We do have a quorum.
If you would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, adoption of the agenda. We need to pull item 6.09 on AACT. The people that were going to make the presentation cannot be here today, so they have been rescheduled for a board meeting in May. And also, we will not need an executive personnel session today. So the chair entertain the motion.
I move that we accept the agenda as edited. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. Carried unanimous. Okay, we'll go to public comment. The first card I have, I think, is Chris Cashin.
Oh, that's me. Kari Cashin.
Carla Cashin.
Kari.
Sorry.
Right here to the podium.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Kari Cashin. I am an illustrator and graphic designer by trade. I'm a single parent of a second grader who attends Double Diamond Elementary School. Our school is really crowded and the parking lot is horrendous. So I'm not one to put up with being frustrated every day. So my son and I have chose to ride our bikes. We've been riding for 2 years. This year I made the commitment to not drive to school once, and we've done that so far. But I have lots of friends in the staff and that are parents at the school, and also Mike Dixon's a good friend of mine. And they're also still frustrated with the parking lot because they're driving. So I wanted to help them out and help my son's school out. So I came up with a solution for the parking lot. And it's cheap and it's free and it's super easy. I wanted to explain to you what it is. I call it Bike Tribe. It's a bike to school cooperative program. I model it after the carpool. So it's just basically a bicycle pool. I created a Gmail address for, biketribe@gmail. And right before spring break, I sent out flyers and invited all the parents and families in Double Diamond to contact me if they're interested in participating in an alternative transportation method. And so if they contacted me, I sent them a link to a newsletter, a digital newsletter I created, and within that newsletter, there's a link to the map of the neighborhoods that attend that school. On the map, I created 40 numbered tribes, and the families would decide which tribe number they prefer to ride with, and they'd return an email to me letting me know that number. When I got 2 or more families interested in riding in the same tribe, I would introduce them to each other through a group email and just let them know that your tribe number, whatever, this is so-and-so, here you go. So it's been working great. I have 1 tribe so far, but that's 6 kids riding bikes now and 4 families that are not driving to the parking lot. And since, I'll tell you how it works real quick just to give you a better idea. So after the group email introduction, we all shared our contacts and now have created a text group, which we call Bike Tribe. We check in every morning. Someone will just, around 8 o'clock, send a text to the group, hey, I'm available to ride with the group today. And then another parent will chime in, I can also ride with the group. And then right around that time, we'll figure out who is confirming to ride home with the kids. So there's, with our group, we have 2 parents in attendance, and we set it up so one rides in front and one rides in the back with the stragglers. So then we just meet at a central at our agreed location, which is one of the family's driveways. And if anyone's gonna be late, we know through the group email or the group text right away, and it's just very quick and flexible form of communication. And over the week, this last week was our first tribe ride together. And it was super easy to make changes on the fly and to adjust how we were managing the children and our safety rules. It's been great overall. The kids all love being a tribe together. They've already formed great friendships. I know my neighbors more, my neighbors know me, and that's strengthening our community around our school. We're keeping more cars off the road, and it's a lot less stress. We have one family that they have 3 little boys. 2 attend the school. One's a 2-year-old, and mom's about to have another little boy next week. So it's great for her because she can just stand in the driveway with the 2-year-old and not have to load up the other 2, and it's great for her. And it's just been a positive thing overall. I wanted to share it today because I wanted to see if any other schools would like to know more about the program. I have a Facebook page. If you go on Facebook, it's Bike Tribe, and it's the officially Reno Bike Tribe. I have started my own branding for Bike Tribe, and every day I put up a little bit of advertising for it with inspirational stuff and explains a little bit more how it works and why it's so positive. My only challenge is getting people to break the habit of the convenience of driving to school. But I think that if I had some support in the school district, and I've already gotten some, actually with lots of communities around the school district, that we could get the word out and maybe inspire more people to adopt this means of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and talking to us, and thank you for seeing a problem
Yes.
and coming up with a solution to that problem, and best of luck to you. That's very, very admirable, I want to say.
Can we give her a round of applause,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Next is Mr. Daly. He's going to be talking on 2 items, so we're going to give him 6 minutes instead of 3. He's got 2 items that he wants to talk on. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. This morning, my wife and I met with Tracy Davis and Byron Green, head of special education. We'd set up a meeting to begin this discussion a month ago, and they needed more time to find more information. When Dr. Byron Green came to the meeting this morning, he still had not read the instruction book about an assessment that was supposed to be done with my child. Further, he told Tracy Davis that Linda and I had not given the district our permission for our daughter to be interviewed as part of an assessment, and that we were effectively blocking the assessment. And he had all kinds of paperwork to show that, until I presented the email where we had granted permission, basically demonstrating that the truth had not been told to the interim superintendent. I got mad. I said, this is just like what happened before under Scott Reynolds and Frank Schlavaggio. And she said, we're not going to let you attack people this way. It's disrespectful. Ladies and gentlemen, it is disrespectful for an officer of this school district to misrepresent the truth to my wife and I and to the superintendent. And she didn't handle that today. She didn't say, I'm sorry, can you explain to me why you just told me that these people had denied permission, and they're showing me in writing, thank God that I brought the emails with me, that we had granted permission. Furthermore, the law says he is supposed to make sure, the district's supposed to make sure that the instruction book is followed. He hasn't even read the instruction book. Folks, things are the same as they were 5 years ago. And you can sit here and you can have your meetings and you can scratch your head and you can worry about public meetings. You're repeating past behaviors. So I'm going to say what other people, including the Reno Gazette-Journal, has said. Do your job or step aside. It's obviously not going to change with good wishes. When he lied this morning, Ms. Davis, that meeting, you talk about respect. Why didn't you stand up for respect then? When he said after a month he hadn't read the instruction book, where was your respect? Where does my daughter get her time back? That's disrespectful. And yes, I am really angry about it. The question is, why aren't you? 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 No, not you. I'm with you. Which brings us to the second point. I have a complaint in front of this school board. You just said there's no reason for an executive session today. Mr. Mayor, you did not tell the truth when you said that. An executive session has been requested to follow a complaint under the procedures that were in place at the time, and this school board has ignored that complaint for months. Do your job or quit, sir. Who holds you accountable? Because if we would have sat down and talked about these issues, I know stuff you don't know, believe it or not. The stuff when you go to your offices you don't know. The district is not going to come forward and say we're not doing our job. I do know with a botched procedure that happened with my child, one of the directors of special education said, oh, but we spent twice the amount of time with your child than we spend with most children on this evaluation. Well, they spent a fifth of the amount of time that the instruction book called for. Now, we're living in a time where in other districts, teachers are facing the threat of jail for not following the instruction book with standardized tests. It's time for you to get serious. You do have a reason for executive session today, sir. And the fact that you said you didn't, after all these months, it's on the record. Nobody has gotten with me to schedule it. It's time. The disabled children of this community deserve more. The people of this district, I want a school district that's a learning organization. That we admit we're not perfect, but we say, how can we make it better tomorrow? We'll never get there if we say, oh, you didn't give us permission. And I show you in mail, in writing where I did. That should be, to me, grounds for termination. And for any administrators that supports that point of view, I would hope they wouldn't run for their position again. And the same for you school board members. Now you talk about open meetings and all that stuff. The history is there. All you got to do is listen. You stay in your cloistered offices with your ears closed, you're going to have more of these same complaints. This district is, my understanding, is under threat to have its funding pulled if it doesn't start. You don't know that? Yeah, there's a letter from Dale Urquiaga. And yet, we won't sit down and talk about it. Folks, there is a reason for an executive session today. And I'm going to close today with the way I closed last time, Mr. Mayor. You keep talking about procedures, and we got to give the people their 3 minutes. What happens with the procedures about the executive session? What gives you the right to selectively enforce the procedures? What gives you the right to delay my access to the system for months like this? You should be ashamed.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it. We have another person here, Mary Alber.
Thanks. Hard to follow that. Can you hear me okay? Is this right? Hi. Most of you would have received probably a letter from me last week regarding comments to the strategic plan. And I just wanted to follow that up with, I read the digital learning policy that's in review right now. And it sort of feeds well into the comments that I was making about what the strategic plan could be and how it could be enhanced. And I just wanted to sort of summarize and reiterate for those of us who may not have gotten to read my letter. But I want to first appreciate how much work you guys do, because there are huge challenges facing the district. There are huge challenges in the transformation of education that is underway everywhere. Including in our own state. where we've got several districts that are moving ahead aggressively with one-to-one digital learning to enable all the great achievements that we want for our kids. So what I'm asking is that you consider taking a stronger stance, making your vision a little bit stronger to say, yes, we can make one-to-one digital learning enabled for every child in this district. We don't know where that money's coming from yet. We don't know how we're going to procure and support, but I can tell you that in my experience as a strategic planner and an information technology specialist, when there is a will, there is a way. There is a way to say, okay, we have a vision that every child's needs will be met in a perfect environment, in a 21st century learning environment where they are achieving to their full potential. That is possible if you unleash the creativity, the innovation, and the awareness of how it's happening around the country today. In fact, my daughter did an IB Extended essay on this topic, and she was talking with people in Argentina who are further down the track than we are in this district and in this country. So we have lots of room for improvement. And I would like to see and support your ambition to take a stand on, say, we not only do we want to empower our teachers to teach 21st century learning methods, we want every kid to have the ability to be online with those blended learning, empowered vehicles of learning that we have today. They're available today. We just need to open the door and get every kid a laptop to do so. And, of course, the teacher's willingness to learn how to teach with them. So I'm going to run out of time, but I just wanted to wrap up and say, unleash the creativity at the schools, including letting the P16 Education Alliance do some awesome things at North Valleys, where they're partnering with the businesses to find the creative ways to bring that technology to bear so that every child's potential can be achieved. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your letter. That's it on public comment. I do have one that wants to speak on item 6.1, but anyone else that wants to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, period. We'll go into board reports. Logan.
I don't have anything.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
how about your student advisory board meeting this week?
Oh, last week it was just kind of starting to wrap everything up. Next month is our last meeting, so it's the one last week was just kind of reviewing what we did at the Student Data Symposium, and then we had a presentation about capital funding just so that they could kind of figure out where everything is being used, and it was just kind of one of the end of the year meetings where we just kind of relax and just kind of talk about what's happened.
Sounds good. You've done a great job this year.
Thank you.
Lisa Ruggiero,
I'll pass today, thanks.
pass. Okay. Nick Smith.
So I did a few things, one of which was pretty difficult for me. I like to talk, but it's hard when I'm talking to 1,200 high school kids. So, Scott, I did the best I could. I really did prepare, but then I blew it. Like, it wasn't so good. It's so nervous, right? 1,200 high school kids just staring at you. It was difficult. But I'm really excited, actually, about some things coming up in the future. I get to go hang out with the staff at Agnes Risley next week for their staff lunch. So that's going to be pretty cool, like all 55 people. And I'm super stoked about that. I know it's coming up, but I think what I'm most excited about is when I take a tour of that school, they have student tour guides. And so I've not been to a school yet that has student tour guides. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I can't wait to do that. That's pretty much what I did and got going on. So.
Very nice. Dr. Taylor.
All right, I got a lot of school visits in them. I want to make sure I get to all my schools. Let's see, went to Verdi Elementary School. They had a volunteer breakfast, and so I got a chance to meet with a lot of their parent volunteers. Very, very active out there. and they too had their sixth graders were their hosts. Their fifth graders were the hosts, and they greeted you, and they sat you, and then they came and took your order if you wanted the muffin, or if you wanted, I think I got a yogurt parfait and tea, and they refilled it. It was awesome. It was really great. Got a chance to talk to some great parents out there. Then I spent some time at McQueen High School. They have a job readiness. A whole all day of job readiness, and they have their kids ready for interviews, and they have tables, probably 60 tables set up in one of their gyms, and they have people that volunteer from the community, some people from the district, some of our staff were there to go, and then you interview a kid. You have like 30 minutes to interview a kid, go over questions, and they have their portfolio, their resume, their cover letter, and their thank you letter, and then you give them critique on it. Some constructive critique. You give them some feedback on everything from how well they answered the questions to their professional dress to, it was pretty cool. I wish I could have spent more time there. And then we had the Student Advisory Board. That Logan already spoke about. He does a great job with that. And then spent some time at Mellon. The principal is just recently back. She had a bout with cancer and has been back in place for a couple of weeks. So Mary Slagle and I spent some time there, and then went over with Rhonda and Mamie Tolles. So a lot of school visits in. A lot of school visits. That's the best part of the job, is visiting the schools and seeing what's going on with the kids.
Very nice. Dr. McClory.
Pass.
Pass. Dr. Rosenberg.
I spent a week ago Friday with Byron Green from 7:30 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon. I visited Innovations, Inspire, RISE, a bunch of other places that have the wonderful acronyms that I can't remember, and I have never been so exhausted in my life. I have never seen so much going on that I didn't realize was going on. And a lot of it was just approach, how the kids find the right place for them at that particular time when they need it. For me, discipline has always been very easy. You don't behave, get out. How smart do you have to be? That is really counterproductive in many instances, and I didn't really realize how counterproductive it is until I saw the way they're handled when things are difficult. It's not bang you over the head. It's actually talking and trying to get them to see that this has ramifications. Most kids act off the top, and those of us that are older should know better. I don't. I'm learning. I have never had more fun or been more exhausted in my entire life. When you go on one of those things where it's a half an hour here and 45 minutes there, and they're waiting for you over there, but you have to go over here first, it's really something else. The kids are great. They also had a rummage sale at Innovation. Their rummage is better than what I have in the closet. Unfortunately, it was all the wrong size. That's another problem. I also recognized for the first time how much we depend upon fundraisers for doing some things that really need to be done. And I don't think that sitting here sometimes, I particularly don't think in those terms. And I think you need to. So it's a learning experience. It was great fun. Mike bought us lunch at a place that has pie. Lots of pie. Michael's Delicatessen. Best pie ever. I can't button anything, but I don't care. We needed a respite for a little bit to sit and talk about what it was that we'd seen. And I've been in this business for a long, long time. I was amazed at how little I knew, particularly about what's happening now. Your comments about digital hit home. I hadn't realized how really important it can be to some kids. They can learn that way when they can't learn any other. Okay, fine. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. We also had an audit committee meeting. We have come to the agreement that internal audit is vitally important, but our communication needs to be much better. So we're reworking things. And in the process, I think we're going to come up with something really, really strong. And that's about all I have to say, which is most unusual.
Trustee Frankel.
What I'd like to use my time sharing is about the visit I had yesterday morning at Roger Corbett with their group of parent ambassadors. And it's a program that leverages the energy and commitment of a number of parents who are extremely committed. I want to do a shout out to Jackie, who's the parent involvement facilitator, the PIF there, and the way she ran that conversation and the discussion. At one point, there was a number of issues that came up, and the principal, they went and got her. And she came in and she didn't actually, I think she was unaware that the meeting was actually happening, or she would have been there. But it was an amazing dialogue to witness between the principal and some concerned parents. It was very open, it was very frank. It wasn't always easy, but it was a great dialogue to witness. And a number of the parents have been involved in that committee for several years, have a number of children that have gone through Roger Corbett. And there is one parent, one mom, whose child no longer goes to Roger Corbett, but she continues to be involved to support the school and the community. So I'm just really pleased to have witnessed that and to know more about the work they're doing there. I also spent some time touring the school with Principal Dufresne, and again, really impressed by the interaction and so the co-teaching, the support, the team teaching efforts and co-planning that they do. So I was really excited about the work that they're doing there.
Great. Thank you. And I just want to say I got lots of calls because I had to leave Safe and Healthy Schools Committee early. And I'm sorry I had to do that. But I got lots of calls from people that really feel that this is a step in the right direction and that you guys are going to get some results. They're not wasting their time sitting in a meeting, that there's going to be results. And then, of course, I already commented about student advisory. I was out to Cold Springs Middle School, and if you haven't been out to Cold Springs Middle School, you should go out there. It's 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. And it's an ideal location. It's a beautiful school, and what a wonderful faculty. They're warm and considerate, and they're on top of everything. You go down the halls during passing, they're out of their rooms, supervising, talking to kids, helping kids. I happened to listen to one where the kid lost his library book and the teacher was very sympathetic and was going to do something. And that's the kind of people that we need in education. Then I got to go right down the street to North Valley High School for their ROTC, and you know, I love all the ROTC programs. They're just wonderful. But North Valley's high school is going to have 100% graduation rate with their ROTC. Whoa. And their grade point average for the junior class and the senior class, all of them put together, you know, 3.5 grade point average. What an amazing feat that is, because you know some of those kids might be C students, and so a lot of the A students have to bring it up. But what I like about them is for their project in February, they all have to build a model plane out of, they pick a plane and they do a model, and they have them all up hanging on the ceiling. And it's just amazing, and as an Air Force veteran, I really loved it. And I, as a model train enthusiast, I know what the kids go through, and I look at them, and they are so well done. And so I asked the instructor about it, and he says, you know, he says, this is a project that they put up, and not one kid doesn't complete it in first class shape. And I was so impressed. And then I went to a group that they're not a school district group. They're not even a nonprofit. They don't have a nonprofit status. They're just a group of people. And what they're doing is helping families that are broken, that either one parent, no parent, foster parents, or whatever, get their children ready to attend school. And so I sat down and listened to the lesson that they were doing. And there's about 25 in this group the day I was there. And it's really touching how they tell the story about this one parent that was from a broken home and took this last year, these courses, and registered the kid for kindergarten. And the kid is just a striver in kindergarten through the help. And they set up kind of like Our Lady with her bike tribes. They're kind of setting up groups of people to help these people in getting their kids registered for school, clothes, and things like that. And it's not a nonprofit, and they're just doing this out of the goodness of their heart. It's called Upstart, and I have to give a shout out for them, because to do something like that out of the kindness of their heart, it's not church affiliated, not school affiliated, it's just a group of people that want to do something nice for the community. So I just want to give a shout out to them. And superintendent's report.
Oh, you know, Spotlight.
Oh, I forgot Spotlight. Oh, yeah, thanks. You know, the way we're doing it, I think, is just great. It was so enjoyable, and what we get to do is sit with them at a table. We get to talk to them. We get to see them afterwards and everything. And I just think it was great. And that Hug High group, mariachi band, boy,
That was
those
Hug
kids,
High, Lisa?
Yes, I heard it, and
Okay.
I agree. I concur.
they're really sharp, and it was great. And all the award winners and the principals of the year, all really deserving of their awards. And I just think that we've caught on to something good here, because if we had all those people that were there last Tuesday in this room right now to do awards, they'd be hanging from the ceiling like those airplanes. But I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I do, because I really do enjoy it. So thank you for reminding me.
I need to add actually two things. One is, I forgot to mention this, I went to a reception. One of the things that the district partners with is a group called NOW that takes a group of students every year on spring break on a tour of some historically black colleges and universities, HBCU tours. And so I went to the reception, and they showed a video about their experience, and all the kids got up and spoke about what was impactful for them, what was powerful for them, and then really how it's going to impact them as they come back. And so that was pretty powerful to get a chance to be a part of that.
And what great kids.
Great kids
In
kids
fact,
from a lot of different
the
schools.
boy there, I showed him my secret handshake, and he's going to remember it, he said.
Oh, I'm sure he will. Good, we can tag team on this one.
Okay, so
Superintendent.
Trustee Taylor probably forgot to mention last night where the Department of
We're going to tag team.
well, I gotta set the stage for Family School Support. Had one of our first meetings where we're engaging families to come in and talk about academic needs or whatever concerns they would have with the school district. And a 4-year-old put Dr. Taylor to shame, knowing every capital in the United States and the motto, and we both learned why the basketball team for New Orleans was named the Pelicans.
The Pelicans. Who knew that was the state bird for Louisiana? Who knew?
But we are, yeah.
Geeks, other than the geeks.
You should have taken social studies.
But it was a great opportunity as we embark on our engagement with the community to hear from the families, to hear how they feel about the district, talk about kids. We had large group discussions, then they went into small group discussions. So we are excited about what the department is doing with that, and we will continue to have those meetings and hope that you can join us on some of those meetings. We will be expanding our Jobs for American Graduates program, JAG, in our district for high schools, and so we're excited about that expansion in our high schools. I met with the Chamber of Commerce, the chamber this week. It was a busy day, so we started off with a meeting about an entrepreneurial program we're going to offer for our 6th to 12th graders, where they go through a training, and businesses will actually fund their actual business plan to get their program up and running. So we're excited about that. Then later that afternoon, I went to their Best Kid Barbecue, where we had over 600 students and parents at the Boys and Girls Club being recognized for their leadership. And it was a great event to speak at, and it was great just to interact with our families and know that people are really excited about the work that the district is doing. We supercast Rise Academy for adult achievement, and that we've been talking about Rise and what we're doing for that work. So now there's an opportunity for people to go online and hear from Principal Shabandi and talk about what opportunities we are affording to a variety of students. I judged a writing contest at KMPB, and there were some wonderful writings from a variety of students, and it's going to be exciting to see the winner. The winner will actually get like a video clip of their story made, and people will get to view that. I was a keynote speaker at the Seroptimus luncheon, which was great because they actually provide resources for women to further their education. And it was nice to hear stories from people who, had some serious issues where they couldn't finish, but they overcame those obstacles and they are finishing their education. So that was great. Let me see, I had a long list. Supercast, barbecue, and I guess I'll close with the Clark County School District, Douglas School District, and Elko, and I met last week with our legislative people to talk about school funding, and it was great to see a team of rural, the big districts, and we're probably in between, talk about our challenges and our needs with lawmakers, and them sitting down and listening and coming up with some plans to how we can fix some of those issues. So we are busy, and we are happy that we are still focused on kids and the graduation rate and helping every school. So business as usual.
Great job. Great job.
Great. Okay, we'll move right along to consent agenda items, numbers 3.02 through 3.11. Is there any that you want to pull? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I so move.
A second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. So carried. Let the record show that it was unanimous. Okay, moving on to 4.01, legislative report. Okay.
Hello, Board. Good to see you all again today. This is Scott Baez with your Government Affairs staff. I want to give you briefly a rundown of the events of last week. We had a very busy week at the legislature. Another big deadline occurred last Tuesday. That was the deadline at which all bills had to pass out of the House that they originated in. So we had a great day. Two of our top priorities were passed unanimously by the Senate. That would be the bill that you sponsored, SB 19, allowing school districts to present a advisory ballot question to the voters at general elections. That was unanimously approved by the Senate, and now moves on to Chairman Lynn Stewart's Legislative Operations and Elections Committee in the Assembly, where it has not currently been scheduled for a hearing, but we're working on that. Next, SB 411, which was sponsored by Senator Debbie Smith, joined with many other members of the Washoe delegation, was also passed unanimously by the Senate. That would allow school districts to form a committee to study capital improvement needs and present a binding ballot question to raise funds for school construction and repair at the 2016 general election. That was also unanimously approved by the Senate, and it now moves into Chairman Derek Armstrong's Taxation Committee, where we feel very good about its odds. Mr. Armstrong has been a very open-minded legislator and one who's been, he sits on the Education Committee, he cares about education, and has been a pleasure to work with so far. The next deadline will be May 15th. That's when bills must be passed out of committee in the second house where they now reside. After that, a week later, they have to be approved by the full body of the second house. And then hopefully, if the stars align, we will be able to adjourn sine die at the end of the regular session on June 1st. So that means there's only 35 days left in the legislative session and certainly a lot of business to be done. Now in the coming days, there are going to be a couple of big issues to be considered. The overwhelmingly large issue is the economic forum forecasts are going to be made available this Friday, May 1st. That will indicate to the body, where we'll be projected to be at in funding the governor's budget, if the governor's tax plan or some of the other competing tax plans would be able to make up any deficit that may exist. And that will really indicate to the body how we will be able to fund a number of the governor's major funding enhancements. Now, a number of those bills will be heard in the Senate Finance Committee on Thursday. That will include bills to modernize the way that we fund special education. We'll be moving from, under the governor's plan, we'll be moving from funding it through units, the system that's been in existence since the 70s, to a weighted approach through the per pupil allocation under the Nevada plan. They'll also be discussing the governor's proposed doubling of Zoom school funding. If that is approved, then Washoe County for the first time will be required to identify at least one middle or high school as a Zoom school to get that extra funding for our English language learner students. So we're also excited and supportive of that. They'll also be discussing on Thursday in Senate Finance Victory Schools, which is very similar to the Zoom School program, but instead those dollars will be focused in high poverty areas that do not have a high proportion of English language learners. Also funding full-day kindergarten will be discussed. Completing that process, we almost completely fund full-day kindergarten so far in Nevada, so we're going to completely, under the governor's plan, fund universal free full-day K. And then also another of the governor's priorities that's been under discussion recently is the Nevada Ready 21 technology grant. This will be $50 million over the biennium to fund, to begin to fund one-to-one computer devices for our students. So that's another program that of the governor's that we are very much in support of. Another of the district's priorities that will be under discussion in the coming days will be under AB 447 that is currently sitting in the Senate Education Committee. Washoe County School District is working with stakeholders like all the other districts and the Teachers and Leaders Council to amend this bill that deals with teacher evaluations under the Nevada Educator Performance Framework. If our amendment, if our consensus amendment that we're working on is approved, then AB 447 would allow Washoe schools to apply to the Department of Education to be able to continue to use our modified Danielson framework, which is aligned to the NEPF, so that we won't have to have a disruption with our educator evaluations. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
I just want to add that Lindsay is in Carson right now, and so she's working on some stuff, so they just kind of tag team, and he came down and she stayed up.
Yes, sometimes we certainly have to divide and conquer during busy days like this.
Could I just add, Lindsay was on the radio this morning and did a wonderful job. She was asked some rather provocative questions. She handled them beautifully.
She always does.
That's great.
Any other questions?
Is there any report on Senator Smith's bill?
Would that be SB 411?
Yeah, I know it passed out, but any
as I said, it's been referred to the Assembly Taxation Committee. It's in Chair Armstrong's hands, but we feel optimistic about its potential for passage, and I've heard that our delegation is really working together to help secure approval.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
No problem.
Okay, any others? Thank you very much for all the work you're doing down there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What is there, 35 days?
35 more days.
But who's counting?
Yeah, I am.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay. Moving right along to 5.01, approval of plan to comply with NRS 388.700 and through 388.725 for advanced authorization of the reduction of pupil-teacher ratio.
Good afternoon, President, Mayor, Interim Superintendent Davis, and board members. Mike Schroeder, Budget Director. There was an earlier item on the list. It was the third quarter class size report. This is reporting that we've done for the last 2 years. Pretty common, pretty consistent. What happened was the State Department of Education, or the State Board of Education, all the variances that are filed, they end up approving those variances. They were finding it odd that they're approving variances after the fact instead of before the fact. So what they wanted to do is have the Department of Ed gather that information in advance so that they could look at those in advance. So this is kind of advanced reporting on the same type of stuff. The background, the way the information is prepared is the same way. We can still do this. We have Randy Baxley, who's our demographer. We use his projections to build the budget. We use his projections by school and by grade to determine our allocations for the schools. So these are preliminary allocations. It allows schools to start their hiring processes early in the year so we get highly qualified teachers. So this is just doing it in advance. There's no issue with determining the numbers, but the real issue here was with the class size reduction waiver. We're still in a state of flux. Originally, we were told that we're not going to have the waiver. We use the class size waiver currently to increase our class sizes in grades 1 through 3 by 2 students. If that waiver goes away, we would have to go out and restore those class sizes, and it would mean we'd hire closely about 85 teachers. We want to make that decision early enough so we can get qualified teachers. But on the other hand, if they ultimately extended the waiver and we wanted to take advantage of that, which helps offset our budget deficit, then we'd lose out on the opportunity to do that if we decided to reduce these class sizes. So we've kind of come up with a plan, sort of a middle of the road kind of best ways approach to do this. And it's sort of coattailing off what Clark County School District has done with theirs. And what's really happening is the state board, they're really not likely. They find it hard to approve a variance for a 1 or 2 star school if these schools are struggling. They're wondering why districts don't meet those class size mandates. So we've prepared a plan whereby any of our 1 or 2 star schools, we would meet the ratio for all those schools. But what that does is causes the other schools to suffer a little bit. So we end up with a plan that doesn't quite adequately fund all the schools. Our current plan doesn't anyway. A district as a whole under our current plan, we meet all the class size ratios for kindergarten and grades 1 through 3. Under this plan, we would still meet the overall ratio for the district for kindergarten and grade 3, but we'd fall a little short in grades 1 and 2. And that would mean that we're going to file a few more waivers than what we normally file right now. Remember, this is all projection based on what we're looking at once we get into the school year and we actually get the kids and allocate the teachers. We may have some variances or some transfers depending on where the kids are. Then we'd get our actual numbers at that point. So this is just a projection. This will ultimately have some financial impact to us. Exactly what it is yet, we don't know. It's just like our budget. Until all this stuff is finalized by the legislature, we're not really going to truly know what it is. If the waiver is extended, we'll end up with fewer schools applying for a variance, and we can use funds to help offset our budget deficit. The waiver's extended and the plan's approved, we'd still have positive financial consequences from this. The only bad one would be is if the waiver's not extended and our plan's not approved. So this has to go to the State Board of Education for approval. And at that point in time, we wouldn't necessarily know what the impact would be until we got direction from the state board. So the plan we put together is really what we feel is in the best interest of our district at this point in time, given the uncertainty of the class size reduction waiver. And we're just looking for you to approve the plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions, Mike? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move the Board of Trustees approves the plan to comply with NRS 388.700-388.725 and authorizes the interim superintendent to file the fiscal year 2015-16 reduction of pupil-teacher ratios in certain classes plan.
There a second? Second. I didn't hear it.
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. So carried. Let the record show unanimously. 5.02, update, discussion, and possible action to direct the superintendent and staff regarding the 2015-2016 budget and possible budget deficit solutions for possible action. Which one of the tag team here?
Well, I'll start it off.
Okay.
President
Tom?
May, President Mayor, Interim Superintendent Davis, members of the board, and Student Representative Carlson. For the record, Tom Szynski, Chief Financial Officer for the school district. As just taking you back in time, we've started with some budget updates that led us up to a budget work session in March, that led us to some town hall meetings on March 11th and 19th, and that led us to a tentative budget that the board adopted on April 14th. So that's where we're at today. As part of this dialogue that we've been having with the board, the discussion came up of what would we do to solve the budget shortfall that the district has initially presented to the board, which has started at $26.7 million. And Mike's going to walk you through some of the finer details on that in just a minute. But our process was to bring this list back to you. This is more for discussion today, not necessary action. So as has been pointed out by Scott from a legislative update, the Economic Forum is the next critical step for the legislature this Friday, I believe May 1st, if I got my dates right. And then from that point in time, I'll just use my own terms. The rubber's got to start meeting the road in terms of the action that needs to be taken to start to address the final outcomes of the budget. 3 critical items that we've identified in this process is our DSA funding, which needs to be finalized, as well as the class size waiver in grades 1, 2, and 3, which Mike's just alluded to in terms of our plan that was that the board just adopted, as well as textbook waivers. 3 critical things to us balancing the budget. On this plan that you have in front of you, you'll see question marks listed under those 3 components, which means we don't have answers yet. So those are really critical to the process. But knowing that, we, at your direction and through our normal process, have developed, where we stand, where we need to address some additional needs that we're going to talk about in just a moment, and some potential solutions. But again, everything is predicated on getting those 3 initial question marks answered for the district. So at this point, let me turn it over to Mike, who's going to walk you through this spreadsheet in a little bit more detail, and then we can open it up for some discussion and questions.
Thank you, Tom. I'll be referring to attachment A of the board item. As Tom stated, we're really in a state of flux until everything Scott and Lindsay inform you about kind of go hand in hand with what we're able to provide you with. Nothing really happens until something get approved. But on the good news is that Tom and I and Jim McIntosh have been working together with the Department of Education to kind of provide a summary of all the district's budget deficits. Now, the Nevada Superintendents Association has kind of coattailed off some of that, and they're talking to legislators and things like that. So there's some positive discussion going on. We're really hopeful that they'll be able to address a lot of our concerns, but that's yet to be found out. There is some talk about having the class size reduction waiver and having the textbook waiver again, but until it gets finalized, we don't know. But those are major things that will help us offset our deficit should we decide to use those. Now, when we did the budget, we added some things to the budget initially that we found offsets for, so they were budget neutral. They were additional requests. We also had some additional requests that were out there that we hadn't acted on. And we finally looked at those, and there are some of those that we feel like are really critical to the success of our strategic plan. So when we look at those, we're saying these probably need to be in the budget, and when we bring forward the final budget, we'd like to make these as recommended items to add to it. The problem is they add to our deficit too, but we're identifying a lot of offsets for that, and there would still be sufficient offsets ultimately to solve the whole problem. So the worksheet starts with our current deficit that we approved as part of the tentative budget is $26.7 million. These strategic initiative requests, first one is related to college preparedness initiative, and it really provide training for math and ELL courses to continue that initiative. It's about $107,000. Credit recovery classes, the plan would be to send students to 1 or 2 sites to take core classes for credit recovery. And once again, this would be related to graduation rates and help get kids back on track to increase those graduation rates. Good thing about grants is that they provide a lot of services that the general fund can't provide. Bad thing is when they go away, a lot of those services we tend to feel are critical to our operation. Although we don't fund all of them, there's a certain portion of those that we would like to fund. There's about $415,000 of those. One is related to a high school graduation initiative grant that's going away. There's a high school principal and a bookkeeper that are critical to that we need to provide for. The SERVE grant, which helps Sparks Middle School with a police officer, counselor, and a psychologist. Those positions are going to end, I believe, in February of 2016, and this would provide funding to continue them through the end of the fiscal year. And we have a TIP 3 grant that's related to our professional growth systems, and there's a peer assistant review coordinator and secretary that are critical to that operation. And those are the positions that make up that $415,000. Graduation advocates, this is related to Strategic Initiative 322, and it allows us to focus on family engagement and academics for high-risk 9th grade students. So this will allow us to continue those efforts. I think it had something to do with AmeriCorps, and we're no longer seeking that funding, so this makes up for that. The last one, second to the last, would be re-engagement specialists. There would be about 8 of these positions, and they would be the lead and help us continue our re-engagement efforts in the district. Last one is high school alt ed. These would be positions, we call it school within a school. We have a pilot program at Spanish Springs High School and Reno High School that the general fund was currently paying for in the current year. We had a grant-funded program for Worcester, North Valleys, and Hug, and this would provide funding to expand that program to other high schools, and it gives us flexibility and specialized learning environment for students who struggle in the general education classes, and it helps accelerate credit recovery to get these students back on track to graduation. So the total of those is about $2.6 million, so it actually run our deficit to a little over $29 million. And we feel these are critical needs related to our strategic plan, and potentially we believe we'll be able to identify enough offsets to continue those. I'd be happy to answer any questions about those if you have.
John?
Yes.
Thank you. You said just a few words about the re-engagement specialist. Can you explain those a little bit more? And the other question I would have is there a way we can get the summary that he just gave on all of those, description of all of those projects?
Yes, we can get a description on each one that he just provided for you.
Thank you.
So if I could just jump in real quickly, I think this was really critical conversation. We really appreciated the dialogue that we had with Interim Superintendent Davis on this stuff, because I mean, as finance people, we just try to balance budgets, but I think, I mean, this was a good example of where we need to collaborate and make sure we're aligning the budget to the strategic plan and understanding what it's going to take to get kids across the stage and graduate. So I thought it was also a test to see if Tracy could make us faint, but we didn't faint. So, but I think it was very productive discussion. So anyway.
Yes.
And just to add on what Trustee Frankel said, I'd like to see not only a general description so we can study it, but also tie it to the plan, you know, what goal, what area of the plan it's meeting. That would be helpful to me.
And I'll just say the larger portion of some of the items at the bottom directly links to graduation. I mean, those are where we're going out trying to find kids that we haven't provided services for, interventions, credit retrieval, summer camps, AP camps, a lot of those things, and also how we capture kids who normally would go to innovations where their enrollment is a little bit different, and we want kids to be at their home schools, and this is an opportunity for them to still be at their home schools, but some of that funding has been shifted from the high school graduation initiative grant, and we have to make a choice. Is that still important for us to get kids to graduation or not? So in our conversations about needs, we really looked at what was important to get us to that big number of getting kids to the finish line. And we had to cut some things out and say, well, that's not as important as this as it relates to students.
I'll have to punt on your re-engagement question, and hopefully Superintendent Davis can fill you in on what exactly the re-engagement specialists do.
You get to punt, and Dr. Green and his group are here to talk extensively about the work.
Good afternoon. President Mayor, trustees, Superintendent Davis, Byron Green, Chief Student Services Officer for the record. And I'd like very proudly to introduce Rochelle Murillo. Rochelle is our coordinator of our re-engagement centers here in the Washoe County School District. Just to give you a bit of a background of the re-engagements, they are one piece of the High School Graduation Initiative grant that is ending this September 30th, 31st. It was a $15 million grant that essentially funded multiple things, specifically the schools within the schools at Hug, North Valleys, and Worcester. It also funded, at the time, 6 re-engagement centers. We're now at 4, and Rochelle can talk specifically about some of the great work they're doing at the re-engagement centers.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very proud to talk about the work that I've done in the last 5 years with the re-engagement centers. As Dr. Green said, we've been doing this for 5 years. We have 4 centers open. We target youth who have left school, so they've dropped out of school. We do case management with them. We do mentoring with them. We do advocacy with them. We assess their needs in the home. So as you know, oftentimes there's multiple reasons why youth drop out of school. And it's our job to connect with them, to connect with their families, and assess what their needs are, to develop resources for them, and then put down any barriers that they may have to access those resources. We work as liaisons between the family and the schools so that we can develop those relationships. We can advocate on their behalf to make sure that they have all supports that they need to be successful in school. We currently have 154 active cases that we're working. However, we've served over 1,500 youth that have come through our doors. It's something that has made quite an impact on me, and I know it has on our youth as well. And what we've learned is that our youth need those relationships. They need someone to advocate on their behalf. They need someone to be that consistent person that's there, that communicates that their education is important to them and that we're seeing them through the end. Our graduation rate is 26% of the youth that have gone through our program have graduated, which at first may seem low. However, when we get them, they're quite credit deficient, and so it takes us some time to get them through so that they can recover their credits. I feel that this work is extremely important. In 2013-14, 742 youth dropped out of school. And as we know, once we've had one dropout event, subsequent events could occur again, and they're more at risk for dropping out again. So we would like to see be able to continue that work, to be able to continue to reach out to our youth. We do home visits. We will go out to their home. We will do whatever it takes to communicate to our youth that they're important and we want to see them graduate.
And then I just want to add, we talk about kids who are credit deficient, but we know we have one student who passed high school proficiencies within the last couple months,
Yes.
and we gave you the name and said, go help us, because this kid decided right in senior year, ready to cross the finish line, to stop. So there are a variety of reasons what happens to students, why they decide to quit at any given point in their high school careers, and we hand off and you guys go door to door and try to help students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that explanation.
I would just like to add, of all the things that we do, that's something I think that's critically important that we continue. I know it's a tough time financially, but if we can reach those kids that would be out there on their own and have an opportunity for even 1 in 4. I mean, certainly we like there to be 4 in 4, but even in 1 in 4, and knowing that we did the best that we could to give those kids an opportunity, I think it's important.
And it's nice to have several locations so they can go, you know, a lot of times if you only have one, it's hard for the children to go to that one, but here it's equally spaced across the county, so I think that's great.
Right.
Okay, so continuing on, that was a great explanation, far better than I could ever conjured up. So we basically tried to put together a list, and what we're trying to do is put it into some type of prearranged priority order. May not be your priorities, but when I look at this, there's really three ways you can solve the budget deficit. You can find new revenue sources, you can use savings account or reserves, or you can reduce expenditures. And obviously, to me, if you find an additional revenue source, you're going to use it, unless you want to use it for something else. But because we have a deficit, it's typically would be best to use it against that. Use of reserves is fine, but those go away. They don't come back the next year, and you'll find yourself in the hole by that amount, similar amount again in the next fiscal year. And last, reducing expenditures. If we do anything there, then typically we want to keep it as far away from the classroom as possible and still hopefully be in line with our strategic initiatives. So this is kind of a priority order. The first one is ad valorem tax. We get a final Department of Taxation estimate of what we will collect in property taxes late in March. It came in very favorably. We were using about a 3% growth rate when we built the budget, so obviously it came in a little higher than that, and that would add about $873,000 to the budget. So that one would be like, in my estimation, you automatically take that. As Tom mentioned, we have a number of question marks. Part of what we're sending to the Department of Ed and the legislators are what we believe is a shortage in the per pupil amount. If there's any restitution, resolution of that, the economic forum thing is a great thing. I mean, the state operates a number of different budgets. K-12 education is the biggest budget that the state has their hands into. And if there's additional funds there, who knows, they could fund education more, maybe not, depending on all their other needs at the state level. Ending fund balance, as we've talked about in the preliminary tentative budget, we have $5.4 million in the ending fund balance. We have a separate item for our 2% board-directed minimum fund balance, and this would be above and beyond that, so we could use that to offset the budget deficit. We've looked in our current fiscal year 15, and we believe there's savings there that we could use to carry forward to help offset the budget. A lot of that has to do with turnover savings. We have a vacancy review committee right now that we're trying to slow down rehiring of positions that help save money. There's a number of budgets that we've basically stopped spending on: our computer refresh, textbook budget. We also have gas savings because gas prices went down quite a bit during the course of this year. So it's different things like that. Right now, it's about $8 million. Could be more as the year goes on and we have to update our projections here for our June augmented budget. Then we'll get a better handle on exactly what that is. Right now, we feel safe to say it's at least $8 million. We talked about the textbook waiver and the class size reduction waiver. Those are big question marks. Should the legislature approve those to continue, then there'll be certainly a very good fiscal impact to us that can help us offset our budget depending on how far we want to take them. The next item is OPEB, and that's other post-employment benefits, about $3.6 million. We've been pretty aggressive funding our OPEB fund. Basically helps assist in our life insurance and mainly our health insurance costs for retirees or current employees who will ultimately retire from the district and have the ability to access this insurance. And it's a big unfunded mandate. We're one of the few government entities in the state who even fund this, but because we've been aggressive in the funding, we could forego that funding probably this year and for several years. Also, we've had good history with our property and casualty fund. That's a separate fund where we pay all our property and casualty insurance out of, and our workers' compensation fund where we pay our workers' compensation claims out of. Through managing claims and our losses, we've built up reserves over there. So we could basically those funds come from our general fund into those funds. It's like a separate pot of money specifically for those purposes. We could short what we're paying out of the general fund to there, and there's sufficient reserves over there to provide for the services that those funds allow. The next three are assessment tools, EduSoft, measures of academic progress, or MAP, and developmental reading assessment, DRA. We have a great purchasing team. They always looking at contracts, way to reduce contracts. These contracts over the last year or so have been reduced in the amount, so there's basically excess money in the budget for those, and those could be used to help offset the deficit also. Some of the budget reduction requests, what we did is at the start of the budget process, we asked all our departments to submit 5% budget requests, reductions. We didn't know if they have to be used, but we wanted to be ahead of the game and plan for, we already knew we were coming in with the deficit. We're trying to be upfront and offer potential solutions should we have to get there. So they had submitted budget reductions. One of those came from transportation. It was fuel savings. And these are just through using propane and idle reduction program. They've been able to save money, and those were items that, you know, just because of that program and implementing those improvements, we'll be able to save money on. And also from savings for electronic time and attendance system. Then those were some of those 5%. The rest of those 5% reductions are about $3.7 million. We're hoping at this point that we really don't have to get into anything that I'm going to talk about from here on out. Hopefully we don't have to. We're encouraged by our correspondence and talking with the Department of Ed and getting the Superintendent's Association involved and talking to legislators that hopefully we'll see some very positive results from those interactions. Still yet to be determined, but once we know, you'll know. If we never got to those, I basically say it would probably have to be Armageddon before we really get into these type of things here, but these would be part of the departmental 5% reductions, and they involve positions and operating budgets, and these would cause pain to the district if we had to do that. And I don't want to get into specifics because I don't want to scare everybody, but it's basically all departments submitted these: the business office, school police, health services, HR, IT, grants department, communications, legal, internal audit. Everybody was assigned to submit at least a 5% reduction. We also have the safety commission budget. I know we've approved a little bit of that being spent on the emergency system for the phone. That's $800,000. I don't know if you guys are willing to look at there to say what exactly are our needs there. Is that an area that we could look at reduction? I just put it out there because that's one that you guys kind of control, and I'm not sure where everything's going or how big the need is right there. Now, these next ones, you know, we always talk about increasing a walk zone as a major budget saving method. That would save about $360,000. Obviously, kids would have to walk a little further to school, but it's just always a question that comes up, so we provide the information. If we went to a half-mile zone, that would add another $225,000. School support budget reductions, those are similar to the 5%. We talked about central support. When we're talking about school support positions, though, it's really positions and operating budgets, really positions that are really located at the schools. Obviously, you have principals, vice principals, librarians, nurses, psychologists, school police, groundskeepers, custodians, clinical aides, nurses, campus supervisors, plus operating budgets. So it's really related to those type of things. Once again, we're hoping that we don't have to get there. I think we'd have to really get to a critical stage before we'd even be talking seriously about these. But once again, those are things potentially out there that we could look at. And the next ones, once again, we don't really want to do this, but you can always look at class sizes too. One of the reasons we got the class size reduction waiver for grades 1 through 3 was because whenever we have to increase a class size, those are kind of set off and prescribed, so you'd have to go to grades 4 and 12. If we were to look at that, increasing class size by one student in those grades would save about 3.5 million. Going up another student would add an additional 3.1 million. Or 3.3 million, I'm sorry. So all those total up to 34 million. If you get additional funding from the state, a class size reduction waiver from the state, CSR waiver from the state, some of these new categorical fundings, I know the state has talked about, well, you could offset some of what you're short here by using that categorical funding, which to me doesn't really make sense. If we were going to get extra money for GT and we're already spending on money for GT and we just move those funds over here, we're not spending any more money on GT. So, but they keep throwing it out there, and if we had to get to that point, then I guess we could, if there was a potential to do so. But it really doesn't increase the amount of money we'd be spending on anything. It's just offsetting it somewhere else. And that's really just a summary of potential items. We're not really asking you to approve any of these. It's just out there. We're just in this great state of flux. And until we get a better idea from the legislature as to what our funding sources are going to be, we're not really going to know how far down the list we might have to go.
If I could just jump in here, so again, so the point of this discussion was to give you feedback and show you that we do have a plan of attack. I think Mike did a very nice job of laying out what our plan of attack is, and as you can see, as you go down the priority list, the last thing we want to touch is the classroom, but we do have a plan of attack. We do feel very optimistic. I think Interim Superintendent Davis talked about the dialogue that we are having with the legislature, and it is very positive, but at the end of the day, they're the decision makers. We're the ones that are trying to impact their decisions. So I think we're doing a very good job, both from a fiscal standpoint, working with our other school districts, working at the superintendent level, and of course the work that Lindsay and her counterparts are doing throughout the state. One thing that's not in this plan, but I did want to at least touch on it, we didn't put it in here, but we're actively working with Don and Human Resources. I know that something that's very important to this board is that we address substitute costs and what we're doing there. So it's on our radar screen. It just didn't have time to make it into the list. So, but we are actively working that area. We recognize that we've got to get more competitive in the cost arena, so that has not been forgotten, so I did want to point that out. So at this juncture, we'll turn it back over to you and let you ask any questions of us.
Okay, let me just add a few things. So the per pupil increase for the DSA, the CSR waiver, and the restored textbook waiver are the top three things that the superintendents are fighting for down in Carson, because we need those. Those will make an incredible difference to what adjustments we would have to make. So as you talk about us being in flux, we have to have an alternative plan. I believe that we all agree we want the least amount of impacts to students in classrooms. And when we look at what we would have to do when we have final numbers, those would be some of the last things we would look at. We would look at other places first before we even assume, increasing class size in secondary, but we're saying every kid by name and face to graduation. That's a tough sell when we're asking you to do more and then we add more kids to your room. But we do have to be cognizant of the money we have and make good informed decisions as we continue to work as a board and a superintendent.
Thank you. I really appreciate the remarks by all three of you that you're going to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible, because somebody's out there stirring things up, because I get calls from music teachers, keep the music in the schools, and I get all kinds of comments, and I appreciate the fact that you're saying keep it from as far from the classroom as possible, and that's a real great statement by all three of you. However, that $800,000 for the Safety and Healthy Schools Commission, I think that comes right after the school, the classroom, because we've got to do something about the problems that we're seeing in society today, not just in the schools, to provide safe and healthy school environments. And through this commission, I'm sure that we're going to get some wonderful results. So kind of put a circle around it and say maybe last, but
we just did.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, well then, I have something.
Yes.
The issue about increasing the elementary and the middle school walk zones, that's a very complicated issue. Perhaps it doesn't look to be, but if you have to go back and actually walk those routes and know where the children are, whether they're going to cross the street, if you add additional blocks. Some schools are right next to a thoroughfare, so if you add an additional, half mile or quarter mile or whatever, then those children on the other side of that street would have to walk across it. So I've had issues about that before, both at Collin Ranch Elementary School and at Vernice Matthews Elementary School. So I'm not against it, but what I am against is not thoroughly vetting every single walkway and making certain that those children are going to be walking in a safe route. If we're talking about $800,000 budget for safe and healthy, responsive schools, then walking children to school through a safe neighborhood along a safe trajectory is very, very important.
And there's an awful lot of those zones where McCarran splits them. And if you go 1/4 of a mile further, those kids on the other side of McCarran are going to have to cross McCarran. And so you send a second grader out with her kindergarten brother, say from the marina area, and cross to go to Lincoln Park. That's a pretty dangerous place. It's one of the dangerous section of road, and you're going to ask these little babies to cross McCarran. It's something that you might be able to extend it someplace that it's not that bad, but you take the whole the whole McCarran loop, and almost a lot of them places, there's school zones on both sides of McCarran. And if you extend that 1/4 mile, it's tough.
I think it emphasizes the point that's been made that we don't even want to get to the bottom part of this list. Just trying to prioritize the bottom part of this list. But again, we have an obligation to balance the budget, so we've developed a plan, and again, our hope is not to get to the bottom third of this list, but if we do, then it's going to force all of us working together to figure out what's going to be the least painful area to address.
Yes.
Mayor, and I know you've explained it before, but I'm just in the context of this, I want to understand it a little. I want to hear it again. The textbook waiver, and I know that that's currently being discussed in the legislature. If it's restored, what does that actually mean in terms of textbooks and dollars for the district, more or less? I know we've had it in the past, so we do have a sense of what it's saved us in the past. But I also am, and I hear this and I think about this in terms of how old some of the textbooks are, and so I just that's going through my head as well. If we get a waiver, does that mean we don't get new textbooks, or we don't explore other options for providing textbooks? I'm just wanting to understand that more fully.
You want to walk through, or you want me to?
Well, the bottom line dollar amount is $2 million. When we had the opportunity to do the waiver, the board at that time, we had to offset budget deficit just like we're doing now, and we said use $2 million of that, of approximately, it was pretty close to a $4 million budget. It's set aside specifically for textbook adoptions. So that's what we took out, so that's kind of what we're restoring now. If they allowed a waiver, we don't necessarily, I've added $2 million back to the budget, which is part of our $26.7 million deficit. Okay. We don't have to, if they give us a waiver, we don't have to take it back out. You could leave it in there, depending on the nature of the textbooks and status and all that. But yes, I believe we fell behind in our textbook adoptions, just as pretty much every district in the state has. And I don't know how much plays into computerized textbooks and all that nowadays too. So,
but it's probably important to add that we haven't stopped buying textbooks. During this downturn, we continued to buy textbooks. We just utilized a portion of our textbook budget to help us balance our budget. So it's not like we turned the faucet off entirely.
That's what I wanted you to clarify. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there any action that we need to take on this?
No, just this was again to continue our dialogue, where we've been and where we're at now. And right now I think the ball's in the legislature's court as we work our way to adopting a final budget, which isn't necessarily final, because we can adopt a final budget before the legislature completes its work, and then once the legislature does complete its work, we have 30 additional days to amend that final budget. So that's where we're at. I think at this juncture, what we just wanted to do is present this information to you. If you have questions, reach out to Interim Superintendent Davis or Mike or myself to continue this dialogue, and we'll continue to provide you budget updates moving forward, but there is no necessary action to take on this item today.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yes,
Sure
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Does anybody besides me need to take a pause?
Yes.
Okay, let's have a recess, 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
We'll call this meeting back to order, please.
Everybody sit down and shut up.
Thank you.
I will not. It's no fun.
Moving right along, the next item is 6.01, consideration of ratification and corrective action to approve retention of the law firm of Maupin, Cox, and Ligoy to provide legal advice and representation for the Board of Trustees and the district from March 24th through 2015. And on and on and on. And the presenter will be Mike Malloy, Esquire.
Thank you, Mr. Board President, Mayor, fellow trustees of the Board President, and Madam Superintendent, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Malloy. I'm, since last board meeting, the open board meeting on April 14th, I've been your independent board counsel. This matter, item 6.01, is for consideration of ratification and corrective action to approve retention of my law firm to provide legal advice and representation for the Board of Trustees and for the district from March 24, 2015 through April 14, 2015, in connection with the open meeting law violation, that is alleged by the RGJ to have occurred on March 24, 2015, and which is being investigated by the Attorney General's office. That's part of the agenda here. So many of you are familiar with me and my law firm going back for a long time, way back in some cases, but especially back from about late July of last year until more recently. On April 14, at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, as I indicated, you passed a motion carried to retain my law firm going forward as independent legal counsel. Now, that is not the first time that I heard from any of you as trustees starting on March 24, which preceded April 14th by about 3 weeks. That date was the date of your meeting on which there was a vote that is alleged to have been in violation of the open meeting law in connection with appointing Superintendent Davis, and then the rescission of that decision in the same meeting before it adjourned. Now, I started getting calls from trustees who wanted to know what I thought about what had happened on the 24th. I wasn't here. I provided my input. There was a lot of input and discussion from individual trustees. The next day, the very next day, on March 25, I contacted the Attorney General's office, informed them about my knowledge of what I'd heard about what happened the day before. I was specifically informed by a member of the AG's attorney staff that the matter should be considered potential litigation. That permitted me to meet with, I shouldn't even use the word meet, to gather with you either individually or as a group thereafter to discuss and talk about what had happened on the 24th and how to deal with it. Now, the reason this agenda item says ratify, consideration of ratification and corrective action is because The activities that members of this board had with me vis-a-vis my firm in connection with the issues surrounding that open meeting law allegation preceded the formal retention of my firm as such on the 14th of April. And that is why we call it ratification and corrective action. NRS 241.0356 or 365, I'm not sure, one or the other, talks about corrective action, and that's I had not been formally retained by the board prior to April 14th, but I'd been doing a lot of provision of legal services for the board starting on the 24th until the 14th. And that's why my invoice, that is the other part of this agenda item, is for legal services that my law firm provided to the board during that interim period between the 24th of March and the 14th of April. And that is presented in the supporting materials. So that's why I'm here to address this matter. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Any questions? Okay, then I have one public comment on this, Mr. Larry Daly.
Yeah. We're thinking about, we don't have enough money for teachers, so let's hire an outside attorney. And let's hire an outside attorney because we followed the advice of our attorney, and none of us actually read the open meetings law, even though Larry Daly was arrested trying to attend an open meeting. Part of our settlement was that I dropped the open meeting law complaint. We had somebody representing the police chief who was cut off by your attorney during an open meeting, which is an apparent alleged violation of open meetings laws. And then you follow up with this other silliness. You know what? If you did something wrong, step up to the plate. I don't want my money going to Maupin, Cox, and Lizgoy, who had an attorney sitting in my daughter's IEP meetings for nearly a year, and that attorney led us to where we are. Under that attorney's advice, the district liability increased. He advised them about records laws. I said, wait a minute, there's been a previous finding. He blew it off, and there were further findings. Now, I believe due diligence and not advising your client in a manner that leads them to break the law is not just a good idea. That if somebody's not doing due diligence in those things, you could get disbarred for that. So that you would have the nerve to bring this law firm back. If you look at our settlement agreement, you'll see that Maupin, Cox, and Lizgoy can't touch Larry Daly anymore. And if you look at our settlement agreement, it also says I can talk about it. I would not go with silence. We're back to where we were before. I asked for this group to sit down and meet with me, largely about the open meeting stuff, before this happened. But you want to spend money that we can spend on teachers defending yourself from something that, quite frankly, appears to me to be indefensible. We just hired another superintendent a couple of years ago. You don't know the policies? Really? After 2 other open meetings things, you haven't read the open meetings law? It's in English. It really is. You can understand it. Don't you spend another dime. Go to the Attorney General's office and say, you know what? First of all, it's not the RGJ yet that's suing you. The Attorney General's looking into it to see if there's wrongdoing. And he says, well, maybe if I find wrongdoing, they're going to sue you. Let the Attorney General do the investigation, unbiased, without a firm that's been proven in the past, and I'll show you the documents that lead you into further wrongdoing, and then darn it, Meet with me like you were supposed to do 6 months ago. It's a lot cheaper than paying Mop and Cox and LaGoy instead of a teacher.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Questions?
Any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. So carried. Let the record show unanimously. Okay, moving on to
Why don't you
item,
follow your own procedures?
moving on to item 6.02. A discussion and possible action to revise any applicable board policy and other documents whereby the Office of General Counsel and its attorneys would no longer report directly to the Board of Trustees, but rather to report to the superintendent. Mr. Malloy?
Thank you. Addressing item 6.02. Since October of 2013, the Chief General Counsel, who is employed by the school district, has reported directly to the Board of Trustees rather than to the superintendent. That circumstance has been proved to be unworkable and impractical in terms of the fact that it has indirectly led to some significant legal issues and problems. This suggested action would remove any ambiguity that presently exists about the full office of the General Counsel, not just the Chief General Counsel, and to whom that office reports. There's ambiguity over that. It appears to me that the General Counsel's office as such probably does report now to the superintendent, but it's not real clear, while at the same time the Chief General Counsel by contract reports to the board. We need to remove that ambiguity about the General Counsel's office, the in-house General Counsel's office, and so that it unambiguously will be hereafter reporting to the superintendent and not to the board, thereby avoiding some of the issues that have arisen in the other scenario. Now that the board has, this board has separate independent board counsel, that is my firm and me in particular, it will be the General Counsel's office in-house is properly responsible to the superintendent, and that's why this item is presented. Any questions?
Any questions? Trustee Frankel? Go ahead.
I move that the Board of Trustees direct revision of any applicable board policies and other documents whereby the Office of the General Counsel and its attorneys would no longer report directly to the Board of Trustees, but rather will report to the superintendent.
I second that motion.
I third that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. So carried. Let the record show unanimously. Moving right along to item 6.03. Consideration, discussion, and possible action to have training for the Board of Trustees conducted by qualified consultants or third parties regarding the provisions and requirements of the Nevada Open Meeting Law and parliamentary procedure for discussion and possible action. Mr. Malloy, Esquire.
Thank you. I don't actually like that Esquire thing. I never have.
Okay.
But that's all right. A lot of lawyers use it. I'd never understood particularly why. Anyway, item 6.03 addresses some circumstances that bring to mind all the events that have occurred since late July of 2013, especially. 2014, I apologize, I misspoke. About 9 months ago now. Seems like yesterday to me in some ways. Given the recent events beginning in July of 2014, in which the Board of Trustees has been involved in various issues regarding compliance or non-compliance with the Nevada Open Meeting Law, under those circumstances, it has been suggested that the board should have some specialized training by qualified consultants or third parties to help the board better understand the requirements and the prohibitions of not just the Nevada Open Meeting Law, but also some training on parliamentary procedure. I'm not applying for that job, and that's not why I'm here. I just think this is a good idea, and that's why this motion is brought.
I agree. I agree. Do we
Any
move?
questions or comments?
So, do we have a person in mind? I'd be very interested in working with Mr. Taylor from the Attorney General's office. He did some work with Clark County when they experienced an open meeting law violation. So I think he would be someone we'd want to consider reaching out to.
I think having someone from AG's office would be great.
I can speak to that a little bit. George Taylor is the senior deputy attorney general to whom I spoke on March 25 about the recent allegation. Yeah. And he's the one that wrote the current Nevada Attorney General's open meeting law manual, and he's the one who enforces, or at least initially discusses and deals with enforcement of the open meeting law throughout the state. George is a very affable and friendly guy, and he knows his stuff. If he's willing to do that, and I don't know if he is, he would be ideal for you, and he may be willing to do it for little or no compensation, but I can't speak for him.
I'll pay for him out of my own pocket if we have to.
I think it's a good idea, given all that's happened, and we want to move away from all that history and move forward with what the real business of this board should be.
Yes.
Exactly. And, we can look elsewhere too. It doesn't have to limit it, and we can do that after we pass this motion, so. Okay?
I'm ready for a motion?
Yes, I am.
I'd like to make this motion. I move that the Board of Trustees direct staff to organize the training for the board regarding provisions and requirements of the Nevada Open Meeting Law and parliamentary procedure to be conducted by qualified third parties or consultants.
Second.
May I offer a friendly amendment?
Absolutely.
That the first person we do attempt to contact be Mr. Taylor from the Attorney General's office.
I'll accept that. Veronica?
Okay. Everybody understand the amendment? We're voting on the amendment first. All those in favor of the amendment is Mr. Rosenberg added, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried unanimously. Now back to the original motion as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Let the record show unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Malloy. Okay, 604, award of request for proposal RFP number 15-002 for consulting and management services for food service program in the estimated amount of $327,450 for possible action. Pete and Andrea, nice to see you both.
Good evening, President Mayor and Interim Superintendent Davis and board members. Thank you for letting us present to you tonight. It does not feel like 5 years ago that I was here, for those of you who were here, but we were here 5 years ago recommending Aramark for award, and it was a big change for the district. We're back tonight because the USDA requires that we go out to RFP at least every 5 years. Each contract is only a one-year contract, but we can renew it up to 4 times by USDA regulations, which we did in this case. And we are at the end of the total of 5 years that are possible. So we're back to you to tell you a little bit about the process, to tell you who we're recommending, and to give you some ideas of what their changes they're going to make and what their new investments are going to be for the program. So we're very excited about it. We're very optimistic about the future of this program. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to go over a little bit of the process for you. Some of you haven't heard the process we go through for RFP, so it'll be a good opportunity for you to hear about the process, to see how thorough it is, to see the types of committees that we put together, and to see the kind of time we spend doing this. We take this very seriously, just so you know, and it's something that we take great pride in. We'll talk to you about who we're recommending and why, about the financial implications, including both what we're paying as far as fees to the company and what they're promising to return as a profit to our enterprise fund. And then we'll talk about sort of the history of Aramark over the last 5 years, what accomplishments they've had. And I think you guys all have a timeline that was attached to show really in detail some of the things they've done over the last 5 years. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you can. So a little bit of background information. Pete and I got together we really started working on this probably about September, October timeframe. We did issue 2 surveys that we felt were very important to see what others thought of the program. One was a parent survey, and I was really excited to see that we got almost 4,000 responses. And then we also surveyed the principals, and we got about 2/3 of the principals to respond as well. The idea of this is that we wanted to be completely transparent about what our program was doing, but more importantly, what others perceived our program was doing, both the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. But the idea was to provide this in the RFP, which we did, so everybody proposing could see those responses, so that they could not only use that to help them in their proposal to make our program better, but if they're selected, the idea is that they use that information to inform their decisions moving forward. If anybody knows me, I like competition. I like to see as many people participate as can. I like to see what all of our options are for the district. I am not the person who just wants to take the easy path. We really want to do what's best for the district. So we did reach out. There's really 4 major food service management companies in the country. We reached out to all 4 of them, Pete and I. Pete and I met with all 4 of them multiple times. We let them ask any questions they wanted to about the program. We provided them all the information they asked for prior to issuing the RFP. And some of them we met with over a period of 12 or even 18 months. So the outreach started early, and it was often. The goals of our RFP, I would say, first and foremost is that we provide an appealing menu to the students that's nutritionally sound. And that sounds easy, but it isn't always easy. And there are very, very strict USDA guidelines about calories and salt content and whole grains and the fruit and vegetables that they have to have. And we have to meet that. We have to make it appealing to the students. We have to give them choices. And by the way, we charge $2.50 for those meals. So it is a challenge for these companies to do. But it's one of the biggest goals of this RFP is to make sure our kids have choices when they get up to the line, that there's something there that they will enjoy eating and that it's nutritionally sound. We also have to adhere to the state wellness policy, and our own district has a wellness policy that we also must adhere to. Another one of our big goals was to continue to look at ways to serve our neediest students. Some of the ways that we have done that is to expand our Provision 2 schools, and so we want to look at expanding more Provision 2 schools. And I think, as Pete had told you before, our goal is by 2020 to have all of our title schools be Provision 2 schools, and that provides everybody a free breakfast in the classroom and a free lunch. So that's one of the ways. Another way we've asked people to look into during the proposal process was community eligibility, to see if that's an option for the district. So we've asked Aramark to take a deep dive into that now, to look at our district, to look at where our highest free and reduced populations are, and to see if we could better serve needier students by community eligibility. So we'll be looking at that within the next year or so. We wanted to provide nutrition education to students. We really feel like this is an important piece, not just for the education side so that they understand, but hopefully that will help them make better decisions and make in the lunch line. So we want them to know why it's important to eat fruits and vegetables, why whole grains are important, so that when they see pizzas that aren't the same as they used to be, because now they're required to have a whole grain crust, that they might still choose to eat it, and why it's important for them and why we require that they take a fruit serving. So we really think that getting some of the nutrition services staff into the classrooms in cooperation with the principals to really educate students, either in the classroom or at other school activities, at parents' nights, really, really important to us. And so I know Pete's working very closely with Aramark to select the new marketing manager, and it's a really serious position for us because that person will also be responsible for the nutrition education for our students. We want to maximize student participation every year, whether that be through free and reduced students or whether that be through paid students. So that's a major goal, is to increase the number of meals sold year over year. And then last and not least is we have to maintain a self-sufficient fund. It is an enterprise fund. Anything they make in that as a profit or a surplus has to be reinvested into that program. That program does need investment from time to time, and so it's very important that it not only is self-sufficient, but that it turns a profit so that they can, in fact, use that money and invest in the program. We've made some investments over the last 5 years. We've bought production equipment, new production equipment we're in the process of selecting. We've bought a new refrigerated truck. We're doing a freezer expansion at the facility. And so integral to this is that we turn some sort of surplus in that fund so that we can continue to invest in it. I won't go through this item by item, but this is just to give you an idea of the timeline. Now, this is not when we very first started working on it, but this is from the day that we published the RFP. I gave myself a birthday present. I published it on my birthday. I felt so good about doing that.
Oh, happy birthday to you.
To have it ready to go by then was a great birthday present. But just so you know, too, we also leave it out on the streets for a long time because we want the food service management companies to have plenty of time to digest what information we've given them, ask whatever questions they want, participate in a pre-proposal conference where we did tour several schools. We showed them new schools, we showed them old schools, we showed them title schools to give them an idea of how our cafeteria setups were. We also showed them elementary, middle, and high so that they could get an idea. I couldn't tour 100 schools, but it was a good opportunity for them to gather information, come up with more questions, and then we still gave them a month after that to submit proposals. And all of this culminates in tonight where we're presenting this recommendation and asking you to approve it. This was the criteria we used when we evaluated the proposals. We work with the committee members and in particular with the department head, which in this case is Pete, to make sure that this proposal reflects what's important to him and important to the district to be looking at. So obviously we want to look at their experience with similar work. If they've never had a large district, that's certainly something that we want to consider and look at, because the larger the district is, the more complex and complicated it is to serve all these students. So you can kind of take a look at that. We also, just so you know, as a part of our every RFP we do is we look at the company's financial stability. They do have to submit their financials. Someone from the business and finance office has to declare that they have passed or failed that, because we don't want to enter into a contractual agreement, particularly for something this important, where the company may not have the financial resources to be around tomorrow. So this is what our committee looked like. We had our outside member, which is someone not employed by the district, was a parent of 2 students in the district. She's also a registered dietitian, so she brought a lot of value to the group. We had a Title I principal on that committee. Obviously, our title schools feed a lot of kids with our hot lunch program and our breakfast in the classroom, so it was really important to have her on that. We had 2 people from the nutrition services department. Our assistant director is our highest ranking district employee, so his perspective was very important. We had a field supervisor who is in charge of a number of schools, and so she's out at the school sites every day, and so her voice was representing those that work in the cafeteria every day. We had our wellness coordinator for obvious reasons. She brings great value there and helps make sure that our company can adhere to our wellness policy. We had the project manager from the office of the deputy superintendent, also to help represent the education side and what their needs are in the schools. We had our COO, Pete, on there, as well as our CFO and the senior accountant that is assigned solely to the nutrition services account. Here's how the scoring shook out. I think what you can see is that the scoring was very close. Nobody ran away with this, which means of the two proposals that we received, we had two very viable companies, we felt. Both were offering really good proposals. But at the end of the day, when we total up all of the scoring, this is how it shakes out, with Aramark having a higher overall score than the other proposer. Therefore, this committee, who put in a lot of hours and a lot of their own personal time, I might add, is recommending to the board that we award this contract to Aramark Educational Services. The financial implications section, this is the costs. What are we going to be paying Aramark for their services? And I do have to say they really kind of stepped outside of their box and got a little creative this time. I will tell you that for the past 5 years, we have paid 5 cents a meal between the administrative fee and the management fee. This time, it's tiered. And I can tell you that when Pete and Tom and I first looked at it, we thought, well, why is it less the fewer they sell and more the higher? Because it seems like there should be economies of scale. And when we heard their response to that, we sort of got it. Then it made a lot more sense to us. First, it's your first 7 million meals at the lower cost, which is the bulk of the meals being sold. So most of our meals will be paid for at a much lower cost than what we're currently paying. And the idea from them was that if they're successful and they do what they think they can do and what they say they're going to do, then they get a little bit extra there. So they share in our successes. On the flip side, if they're not able to do what they said they were going to do, then they also don't think they should be paid as much. And so when they kind of put it in that perspective, it made a lot more sense. They're predicting almost 8.4 million meals to be sold in FY16. And if you go down this list and apply the amounts, it comes out to about 0.0390 cents per meal. And right now we're currently paying 5 cents a meal. So it does reflect a reduction in costs, but encourages them to be successful.
So talking more about the financial side, as Andrea said, part of the RFP is actually the guarantee that comes to the enterprise fund, which is nutrition services. And this, as Andrea said before, is extremely important for us because just like the rest of our school district, the needs we have in our schools, it's no different in nutrition services. Our central kitchen needs help. I mean, we are busting at the seams. And as Andrea said, we're doing a freezer expansion. We're buying new equipment, but we need to keep going. And so it's really important that we are financially solvent because there is no backstop. The only backstop would be coming to you and asking for money out of the general fund, and we sure don't want to do that. So the guarantee that was proposed by Aramark is a surplus of $397,630. And I'm excited about that. And maybe we can even do better. But that's a fantastic guarantee. And go to the next one. And that's based on basically the enrollment and the current, oh, thanks. This is also I'm really excited about. And you can tell, I think going forward, we're in a really good position to move forward with Aramark. The RFP investment that was proposed by them is $744,000. And this is kind of a listing of some of the things they're proposing. The first one, I talked to you about this, I think a couple years ago, right after I came here, because I'd only been here a month or two, and I went to a COO conference in Orange County, Florida, and that's actually a picture of their food truck from Orange County, Florida. Ours may not look quite like all that, but still, bringing in some fresh ideas about how to capture middle school, how to capture high school students, because that's a tough market. Okay, elementary school is a little easier, but when you get to the high school level, I mean, your participation level drops drastically. And so coming up with some ideas where Aramark's thinking outside the box, and they're going to be trying some things here in Washoe County that they haven't done elsewhere. And we're going to see how they work, and they're going to use those hopefully to go nationwide with them. So 2 food trucks that are going to be brought in predominantly at the high school level to try to capture those kids. As you know, they leave campus right now and go find food trucks.
Right.
So hopefully we can capture some of that. Setting up 10 large outdoor grills outside, so it's not like going to the cafeteria food. You're seeing grilling outside. Make-to-order stations, branded food carts. Those are just some of the ideas we're going to try here, and a whole new branding for the middle school. And that all sums up to $744,000 as we try to increase those basically 26,000 lunches we provide every day and 13,000 breakfasts. So the staffing, Aramark is part of this.
May I interrupt just a minute?
Absolutely.
Logan, as a high school student, what do those ideas sound like? Food trucks, outdoor grills?
frenzy. So I just bring a sandwich, but I think it'd be really cool to have like an outdoor grill. And then food trucks would be super cool because whenever I go off campus, I usually go to like Subway or something, but having like a grill that's there and you see how fresh it is. It's not just something that they've had in the cafeteria since the beginning of the day or whatever it is. I think it's a good idea.
Good. Okay, thank you. Little unscientific research there.
We appreciate it.
So as part of the RFP, what Aramark brings to the district is the employees, the line staff in the cafeterias at the central kitchen are Washoe County School District employees. They bring 5 management staff as part of this, and this is the list of them. I want to focus on number 1, the Nutrition Services Director. Tracy Markham, who I introduced during the department reports, is our Nutrition Services Director. She's brand new to the position, but we could not be more excited as a team to work with Tracy. I think she brings a skill set that is unique in my 2 years here that's going to be fantastic. And I know that her staff is already really enjoying working with her, and so I think, only good things going forward. As far as the history with Washoe County School District, and this again, I'd refer to the timeline that was put in your packet. You may have to have a magnifying glass to read all these, but this shows really the timeline of what we've done, and a couple I'll just kind of highlight. As far as increased meals sold and revenue, in 2009-10, basically sold a little over 7.4, or should say provided a little over 7.4 million meals. In 2015-16, we're projecting about 8.4 million meals, so it's an increase of 1 million meals. The menus repeat less often. We've gone to from a 2-week rotation to a 4-week rotation. And again, as Andrea mentioned, we've added 15 Provision 2 schools here over the past. This is going into our 5th year right now. We're in our 5th year with Aramark. We've added 15 Provision 2 schools. So that is one of the priorities of this board. It's one of the priorities of us, is to keep feeding more children, especially those that are at need. So we're really excited about that, and we hope to continue providing more Provision 2 schools or community eligibility, whatever works best for the district. And so with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
And I do have a larger version.
Thank you.
I have the pretty one, so if that's easier to look at, you're welcome to it.
And we also have representatives from Aramark, from the corporate office here, if there's any questions you have of them.
The legislature last time, 2 years ago, passed a deal that we were supposed to cooperate with districts nearby, and we have done that on several things. But one of them, Aramark, reached out to all the districts around us and offered to do their food service out of our central kitchen, which I thought was a terrific idea. And that's the kind of people that you need around, is willingness to take a mandate by the legislature and run with it. I just think that is a good example. You say there's 4 companies nationwide that do this?
For the most part, yes.
And so you got half of them to bid. Okay.
And I do agree that their participation in the community has been fantastic. Whether it's the Run for Education or the other community events at the Aces Ballpark, they've really shown to be partners with the community, and I just applaud them for that.
I just have a comment. I'd like to thank you for the organization, the structure of this presentation. As somebody who likes logical and decision-making processes, I really appreciated the way you started with the goal, talked about the criteria that you used and the criteria rating process that you used, as well as some of the other considerations in making the decision. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing all of that information.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Taylor.
We had a chance to have a call because I had some questions on the survey results, so thank you for that. One of the things that I'm excited about is the marketing director, because I think it's really easy to talk about how we want our food to taste better, and we do, and that's why we had the conversation. But when you have all the requirements from the FDA, and you have, because one of the things that stood out there, I don't know if the trustees recall seeing those results, was like half the people didn't like the pizza. What kid doesn't like pizza? Your kid doesn't like pizza?
They don't like Aramark's pizza.
Oh, right, and part of and that's why I think the marketing part and those, because when you have to have whole wheat crust and you have the FDA requirements, it isn't going to taste like Pizza Hut.
Right. There has been a lot of changes to the USDA requirements over the last 5 years, and those changes have cost us a lot of money. And we are trying to implement those also without raising the prices to the students, particularly during the recession. But part of this healthy and hungry-free children, you know, Michelle Obama's big push, it's really good and well-intended because it is healthier food for our kids. And as a parent with kids in this district, that's exactly what I want. But sometimes it's hard to convince our kids that they should eat it because they prefer things that
Convince
aren't
them
healthy.
that it's what they want, huh?
Yes.
But it may help me understand the challenge between balancing the requirements of the FDA and the financial limitations as well as the taste. So it'll help me understand that. So having the marketing person and maybe educating the kids a little bit better and continuing those, you know, the grills and the food trucks and those things that Logan said, you know, got his attention. I like the direction that we're moving. So thank you very much for your work.
Great job.
I appreciate that.
I'm ready to call for the motion. I move
Just
that.
a second.
Oh, I'm
I have some
sorry.
questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So when I look at the scoring sheet, Aramark's goals are ambitious to grow their guest count. That's just the number that I use, or the name that I use, to grow their guest count. However, their participation and marketing plan is equal to that of the second bidder. And their 21-day menu actually scored lower than the second bidder by more than 4 points. And so one of the things that I know, just from the business that I'm in, is marketing and options grow guest count. So I'm trying to understand, you guys weighted it at 15%, but they were off by 4%, and one of the ways to grow that is by the options. So maybe Aramark can speak to, one of the representatives can speak to how they plan to get that ambitious growth with their meal plan. And then I noticed in the contract that they're only obligated to their 21-day meal plan for the first 21 days, and then they can come back to the district and provide substitutions that they would like to get approval for. What do those look like?
So that's true, and that's a USDA requirement, and it's a requirement when the state actually has to approve the contract, and there's certain elements that have to be in there, and one of them that I have to put in the contract says they must adhere to it for the first 21 days. The idea always is they don't want to submit a menu and stay with it and have no options to change, because if they have it and then nobody likes a particular offering, they need the ability to make substitutions. But they know they cannot do that without the district's approval, so they have to work through Pete before that they can implement changes. And one thing I didn't touch on in this that I should is that we have monthly meetings that we call financial and operational reviews. And so Pete, myself, Tom Szynski, part of the nutrition services staff and the Aramark staff are in this meeting. We go over in detail the financials. We talk about any barriers they have, any obstacles they have. They were having some high waste at one point, so we brainstormed together and they proposed to us and we accepted their proposal for how to start reducing waste. So any of those changes to the menu would have to come through Pete and would be discussed in those monthly meetings. But we want to have some flexibility so that if certain things aren't selling, kids aren't responding to certain menu items, that we can make those changes and make them more appealing to the students.
And then really quick, just so you have the other question I have. The other question was their contract allows for a 5% variance in food cost. So if we go over the 5%, the district's now going to be encumbered with that increased charge. But is there a trigger in there that says, wait a minute, if it's an operational deficiency, we're not responsible for anything over that 5% now, as opposed to, if commodities change, I get it, right?
Right.
But if it's an operational deficiency,
Right.
are we still encumbered with the increase in food cost?
So I will tell you that cost of goods sold is something we talk about voraciously every month. So, I mean, if there's one thing that we're all paying attention to, it is that. And in that contract, what that means is they actually buy the food for us and they charge us for it. And what that is really saying in the contract is, even if prices go up on if your cost of foods go up even by 5%, you can't come back and say we're not going to return the same amount of money that we promised. It's only at the point that the cost of goods that is indicated by the CPI index, so they can't just say, oh, trust us, or show us something from their vendor. The CPI index has to show that the food prices went up more than 5%, and only once it exceeds that 5% increase can they come back and reduce their guarantee to us. So we actually, it used to say 3%, it says 5%, because we want them to be held responsible for a longer portion of time or through some increases without passing that on to us.
And every single line item is reported with full transparency. So every month when we have these meetings, and every quarter, it's shown every single month. It shows by every category, so that every piece of that we're responsible for, and it's tied back directly to the performance of the whole program.
Would you state your name? for
I'm
the-
sorry.
Yes,
My
please.
name is Annette Hang. I'm the Regional Vice President for Aramark, and I've been here since the beginning. So it's great to see here, and I can't believe it's been 5 years either. Lots been going on. Behind me is Ralph Young, who's the Vice President of Operations, and he actually used to be with our Operations Excellence Program, which helps us with menu development and such. And the one comment I would make about menus before I introduce Tracy is that anyone can propose a menu that looks fabulous. It's one thing to present a menu, it's another thing to put it in front of students and have them participate. And so we have to work together very closely with the district and the students, what works, what doesn't, what's being thrown in the garbage, because we don't want that to happen.
Right.
So that's to answer your specific question about the menus.
Excellent.
You know, I looked through this contract really, really close because I don't want my Foxy guy to get axed. And,
I know you like that.
well,
I know, Ace the Fox.
and
Yes.
for people that don't know, they bring out vegetables and fruits to school that, like, the time I saw Foxy, kiwi, some of the kids have never seen it before, let alone eat it. And Foxy is there, and through the Department of Nutrition and UNR, they give a little speech, a little lesson actually on nutrition and everything, and he helps them eat. And one kid was eating kiwi, ate the skin and all, and I go, oh no, don't eat the skin, and Foxy says, yeah, that can eat the skin, that's where the nutrition is. So I didn't notice if that program is continuing in the contract. It is continuing?
Ace the Fox, yes.
Okay. Did you have a?
No, she was going to introduce Tracy.
Yes, Tracy has been a dynamic member of the team, and I'll let you go ahead and present yourself, Tracy.
Yes, I started in July here as general manager, so I was in charge of menus and the production center, also the warehouse, and then recently took over as interim director and now have been offered the position as director. I've had a great time. We've already made great strides in food costs and in some menu changes, and have menu committees formed to go over the menus for next year so that there will be input. And as you know from the presentation and different things, we'll be continuing to get parent and student input in order to make the menus exactly what they need to be by regulations, and also what students want for more acceptability.
Very good. Okay.
One last question. Since this is a one-year contract, should we expect that in the next school year, those food trucks will be online and the branded carts will be online? So we're ready to go.
We're phasing them in throughout, so we'll work together with the team here, and we're going to do a planning session to decide when is everything going to be rolled out.
But you're
That's an
committed to that in
expectation.
this coming school year?
Yes.
So, okay, good.
That's funny. It's almost the same conversation I had with them this morning.
That's right. It's pretty
I
consistent.
just want to make sure, because it's only 1 year, and then we can continue it for
Yes.
another year for the
That's
next
right.
4
Oh,
years
yes,
without the
absolutely.
RFP.
Right.
So I don't want like the lost leader, right? Like
Right.
the $9,000 car, and you get there and that car's gone.
Right.
But I'll get you one for 25.
Yes.
Right?
So no, we did ask them to present a plan to us for implementing their investment program, and we talked about the fact that we didn't want to be standing up here next year asking you to renew the contract if they hadn't done what they said they were going to do. So it was important, particularly these things that might increase participation at our low participation schools, which are typically the high schools, that we implement some of these ideas, and we can report back to you what we're seeing so far when we come back in a year.
One last question, if I may. I forgot this one. And this one has just been, maybe you guys can help me, maybe they can help me. So some of our schools are Provision 2, and my kids go to a Provision 2 school. However, if my kids go to, and everybody, that means everybody now is getting a free lunch, right? But my kids don't take the free lunch, right? And I send them, and you guys talk about the accountability is by physical lunch count. So if it's a Provision 2 school and there's 400 kids and my 2 kids bring their own lunch, is the physical count 398 or is it 400
No.
because it's deemed Provision 2?
Yes, it's a physical count. When they come through the line, they don't have to put in a badge number or do something to identify their paid status. It's just a clicker. So they come through the line and they physically count each person. If a student does not eat, we do not receive reimbursement for that student.
So if my 2 kids go to Provision 2, don't get the lunch, you
That's
don't
correct.
get reimbursement?
That's correct, not for your students.
Cool. That's it. I'm sorry.
Any other questions or comments?
And Trustee Smith, to one of your earlier questions, let me just say too that once we made our recommendation of award and we made that public, we issued what we call our letter of intent, we asked Aramark to come back and sit with us and go over some of the scoring. And we talked about some of the places where they scored lower and talked about some of the things that they might consider doing differently. Some of the things just like she's saying, it's when someone's coming in new, it's easy to say you can do all of this. When you've been in here 5 years, you know what does and doesn't work, and so it looks a little different. But we did have a very frank conversation with them. Pete and Tom and I sat down with them after we made this to show them where they didn't score as well and to talk about some ideas for making improvements in those areas.
And if I may say, this has been a true give and take partnership. You know, there's always going to be ups and downs, particularly in the service business. So what we have to do is work together. When we hear something has gone wrong, we have to fix it. Sometimes we see something going wrong before they see it going wrong. So that's important. It's got to be a give and take. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of our team for the partnership as well.
Okay. Just so you don't remove the pepperoni salad either.
I'm going to make the motion.
I have to write that one down.
Thank you.
I move that the Board of Trustees approves the award of request for proposal 15-002 for consulting and management services for food service program in the estimated amount of $327,450 to Aramark Educational Services.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. Passes unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving right along. We'll go to 605, right? 605, presentation of Envision WCSD 2020 update, investing in our future survey results. Irene Payne, who's awaiting the birth of the new heir over in England.
Bated breath, for sure. So, good afternoon, President Mayor, Trustees, Interim Superintendent Davis. For the record, Irene Payne, Chief Communications and Community Engagement Officer. So, I'm back here to talk to you about the survey, the community survey, internal and external stakeholder survey around 5 goals of the strategic plan. So that was what you asked us to do a few months back, was to go back out to to our stakeholders for the second time to ask for input on the 5 goals of the strategic plan. Now, I know you've all had copies of the feedback on board docs, but I have actually brought paper copies of the report should you wish to take one of these home with you, simply because I feel that it's easier to read a document, read this feedback when it's in front of you than trying to read it on a computer screen. So I'll hand those out in a moment. Oh, thank you. So you gave us this very clear direction that although we'd been out to the community around the strategic plan, really as a new board at that point, to really go back out again just to verify that the 5 goals in the strategic plan were the goals that the community was expecting or wanted to see of the school district. So we really did use all of our communication tools to promote the survey and to encourage stakeholders to respond and to complete the survey. I just really want to draw your attention to the fact that we actually hand-delivered packets of the draft strategic plan, as it is at the moment, together with the survey in English and Spanish, to a whole number of public locations, including we went to libraries, neighborhood centers, community centers, Washoe Senior Services. And then, as per the request from Trustee Smith, we actually reached out to the PIFs at the school. So we have 41 PIFs, and we reached out to the PIFs, gave them a pack of information together with a survey. Obviously, everything is always in English and Spanish. And we asked them to encourage their parents to complete the surveys. We also hand-delivered packets to each of our district schools and asked them to encourage visitors to the school to complete the survey. So we really did do our best in terms of outreach and encouraging stakeholders to complete their survey. So going through the questions, as you know, we had a number of open-ended questions, which I think the value in the survey is in the feedback around the open-ended questions. So you now have those in front of you, and there's some real valid and interesting feedback that may not be applicable for around the 5 goals in the survey, but certainly for consideration going forward or at some point in the future. I would say the topics of concern or of input, and this probably isn't very surprising, revolved around students, the academics, testing practices, the amount of testing, the curriculum, and then to kind of reaffirm Ms. Alba's comments both at the public comments today and in the email that she sent you, I think it was earlier this week or last week, around concern around technology in schools. So just quickly going through the survey questions, without a shadow of a doubt, around 73% of those people who responded to the survey felt like the goals that were outlined in the draft strategic plan were the goals that the district should be focusing on over the next 5 years. And then we asked, did respondents believe that the school district was heading in the right direction? And 66% said yes, they did believe we were heading in the right direction. And then we asked a question around the current strategic plan. How did those respondents feel that the current strategic plan had been implemented? And as you can see, around 45% thought it was either excellent or good, and we had 22% who really didn't have an opinion or a comment on the implementation of the current strategic plan. In terms of who responded to the survey, we had 547 respondents to the survey. 35% came from non-district employees, non-district community members. So we had 64% that were employees, and then 36% that were community members. So the community members, when we looked at who made up those community members who'd responded, it was parents, business leaders, and then we had a whole bunch of folks that we couldn't identify, but we knew they were not employees of the district. Around employees, overwhelmingly 50% who responded were teachers, and you can see the breakdown there of who actually responded in terms of employees within the school district. So, as I said at the beginning of my very short presentation, I do believe the value is in the answers to the open-ended questions. But having said that, it certainly appears that there is overwhelming support for the 5 goals of the strategic plan, and that was the point of the survey, was to really get some feedback around the 5 goals. So with that being said, I now wait for your direction in terms of next steps, because we have this draft document, and really it's what are the next steps? So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, but really I want directions in terms of what do you see us doing next with this document?
Any, okay, Dr. McCleary?
I haven't really had a chance to go through every single one of these. However, I do appreciate the fact that the letter came, because the whole issue around 21st century learning skills in relationship to technology is one that I believe we all strongly would support. I would say 2009, 2010, we started a one-on-one technology initiative. However, when Heath Morrison left, and there were other issues around that, and hate to say it, but it happens to be true, the funding for all of that. And so we're looking at how do we prioritize where we would begin that. I mean, I am a strong proponent of utilization of the blended learning with children and technology. At Bernice Matthews, I had over 150 computers, and we had every teacher's classroom had a pod of 4 computers, and then there were instructional programs dependent upon the needs and the grade levels of the children. So that was something that really enveloped those children in relationship to their language learning, the development of the vocabulary for the content areas, and so many other things. I think that there are a number of good ideas that you presented, along with some others that I managed to get through about half of them. I would like to have some time to go through, possibly if anyone else is interested in doing that, looking at what we've got, because some of the language, I believe, there's been a lot of ups and downs with putting this plan together, and it should have been finished last spring. So it's a good thing now we've got this additional time to take a look at what are some other opportunities for us to embellish and or fill out, because in some of what you're talking about in your letter has to do with the structure of the plan. And we've got an area in here about 21st century instructional skills and so on for teachers, but we really don't have anything as it relates to children. So I think that perhaps we need to at least look at some of this and take some time.
So maybe as just a follow-up to that, in terms of launching the plan, the perfect time would be to do it at the start of the new school year.
Right.
So we could potentially do it at the A&S meeting, when we bring all the principals together at the start of, just before the start of the new school year. Then that would be a wonderful opportunity to talk about the goals and the objectives for the district, not only for that coming school year, but for the coming 5 years. So with that being said, it gives you some time to perhaps just have a look at the initiatives and the objectives under the goals, just to make sure that they are really what it is that you want us to focus on.
And I think that you should incorporate some of these other things that have come across my desk, not only her letter to me this other weeks ago, but the blended learning and that should be added. But I also got, and I think Veronica forwarded it to me, but I got one with, it was one of those that we handed out at town hall.
Right.
It was from
It was
Andrea.
scribbled all on
Yes,
it.
it's included in your report.
Is it?
Yeah, we couldn't really take that information and integrate it, so we literally just copied it and added it to that report.
Okay.
So you have that too.
See, I think some of those ideas are very good and should be added also. So I think you should take a little time and all the things that you've gotten back and stuff, see where they can be integrated into the program, and if not, maybe add another goal. Yes.
What I would suggest is that that's actually work that we might need to do ourselves, and I'm wondering if we need to schedule just a work session like we did with the budget, but a work session solely focused on the strategic plan in light of all of this input, so that we can identify, as we take the time to go through all the feedback that we've received, we can identify, here's some common themes, here's some that jump out that really need to be incorporated. So that would be my suggestion.
But I would like them to compile something as an add-on to the draft, so that we could really say, well, can we plug this in here or there, and then have a workshop to determine the amended draft form. You understand what I'm saying?
Not totally, because I'm not sure if you're asking me to take information from the results and integrate them into the draft document, which means
No.
that I'd pretty much be writing the plan for you. So.
No, but identify where they go. For example,
Oh, okay.
you know,
So I think what she's asking though is that everything. If someone put class sizes in kindergarten 5 to 1, do you want that integrated in the plan, or do you want a list of all the concepts? And as a team, you decide rank order and provide feedback versus her taking every little thing and putting it somewhere when maybe it's not feasible to do 5 to 1, and that would be the bottom of your list. But what's more important is a movement to bring your own device 1 to 1, whatever that might be, so we can kind of rank order. And when you make the decision, we can identify where it will fall versus putting everything. That's her question.
no, I don't want I'd like that, and I don't have it with me, but I'd like the survey to be identified goal-wise.
Okay, I think I understand.
You understand what I'm saying?
So categorize the feedback as best we can under each goal.
And
Okay.
if necessary, because I've noticed a lot of good new ideas, if necessary, we might have 6 goals. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Or category that doesn't necessarily fit into
Yeah.
the
Yes,
existing.
we'd have another category, wouldn't we?
And there may be several things under it, so we can decide
Absolutely.
from there how that may fit.
Yes,
in priorities.
we can absolutely do that.
Yes.
Thank you, President Mayor. So I think what I'm hearing trustees and staff saying is we need to have another conversation, and I think it's a great idea. I really echo what Veronica is saying, because it is there are new members of the board, and we have a interim leader. And so I think it's important to have that dialogue and discussion. I think coming to the session prepared with the feedback from the survey in an organized fashion would be very helpful to the trustees. But I would like that to also go through Superintendent Davis, because I think she has some eyes as to where you can help frame things for us when you bring it to us. But so I think it's a compromise of both. But I do recommend a work session, and also that would be an opportunity for the community to come in one more time and give input through public comment.
Mr. Rosenberg.
This isn't all that new. Only 35 years ago, we called it audiovisual aids. So really, the goals were very much the same. It's that now with technology being what it is, it's only one thing that we have to deal with, which makes it, I think, a little less expensive and not needing as much as we used to. So I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. It's a question of just ordering these things so that they make some sense.
And I think as part of bringing back those initiatives, we need to do a cost analysis of what that particular item might be, so you also have an idea of what that looks like, whether there is a cost or not a cost, or a potential cost, or if we have to go look for grant opportunities or what they may be, that we can provide some of that information based on what the feedback was provided.
When we originally, when we originally did this whole process, Paul Lamarca and crew put together an interactive computer on the website, a place on the website for that, and what it was going to look like with the initiatives, so that if you clicked on goal 1 or you clicked on goal 1 objective A, you got an initiative which gave
Correct.
you all of the
Yes.
metrics and
Yeah.
everything else. So
Yeah.
where are we with those initiatives, and are those things still part of what we're going to be doing? Do you know?
Well, I think it's a work in progress when we finalize the actual strategic plan. That's what we're
right.
getting at, because there might be things taken out, things that we previously have done, or we continue to like support the middle school initiative. And just speaking to the letter we received, part of the idea, she talked about Clark and their one-to-one initiative, which I was a part of. I do know that they did one-to-one initiative through title funds and grant monies. They use a different pot of money. So those ideas of how are we going to be creative if we are going to fund that is important to when you talk about one-to-one devices. What does that look like? Make sure we're not supplanting all these issues that we would have to address before we move forward.
But again, if there's a goal worth having as a goal, and it cost $1 billion, and it might be unrealistic, but it's nice to dream. It's nice to dream. If we had a pot under the rainbow, what would we do? So I don't think we should scratch anything because of the cost. I think that should all be in the goals, because who knows? You know, we might get a whole bunch of money someday. You understand what I'm saying? But I think, so are we discussed out?
I think we're ready to move forward with the.
Are we discussed out?
I'm gonna start singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow in a minute.
Okay, I'm waiting patiently for that.
Don't encourage him.
No, I think you got direction from the board, and that's
I
what
have.
we wanted to do.
Yes.
And
could I
by
just
the
ask
way,
a question
thank you very
quickly?
much for all your hard work here and your
You're very
staff's work.
welcome.
It's hard to compile surveys, I know. Yes,
Question, Pete, this is for you, and I don't mean to throw you. I know how much a laptop costs that, you know, we buy at the school store up at school. If we were to buy them in bulk, like from Apple, could we get a decent deal so that they wouldn't cost as much per individual piece?
Pete Etchart, COO. I was looking to see if Andrea was here because we just purchased quite a few. We actually bought 69 laptop carts, each one with 30 laptops on it.
Yeah.
And we have a contract that we bought those under. So we have a set price. It really doesn't vary much from that because, like I said, we just bought whatever 69 times 30 is, you know, a
Right.
lot of laptops. And that's the price. So,
At $300 a piece?
no, I can't.
Here she
Oh, here she is.
Speak of the devil.
Andrea may remember the price.
I heard my name, apologize, I didn't hear the question.
It was in
It's about
regards.
laptops.
Andrea, if
price.
we buy 300 laptops, do we get a break on the cost of each one? Or do they each cost $300 whether you buy 500 or two?
So what we have standards, and so our IT have identified standards.
Yep.
And so at this point, we offer two brands that meet our standards, Dell and HP.
Okay.
And so whenever we're gonna go buy them, there's already existing contracts with both of those companies.
Okay.
So we go to those companies and say, we're intending to buy this many, what's the best deal you can give us under this contract? Because sometimes, because of greater volume at a time, we can obtain lower prices.
prices.
Sometimes it doesn't work because they do give us educational discounts as it is, and it's pretty rock bottom pricing. But sometimes we can save another 2 percentage points or something like that
Okay.
by buying them in volume when we're doing these refresh projects.
Because the university's having the same problem. Do we want to be a laptop-only university where every student must have his own laptop?
Well, there's all kinds of issues with everything that you're going to do, so you have to try and make a decision somewhere along the line. But Los Angeles, I mean, across the country, they have all kinds of issues buying what they call instructional programming with computers. And so there's many facets of this, and you have to make a decision based upon what we want as an outcome somewhere.
Okay.
If you're looking, I mean, there's different levels of the utilization of computers and moving up into the higher echelons with students who have a better knowledge and understanding. I mean, do we want our children to know word processing, which I think is a very valuable thing for students to know how to do? Because what it does is it releases their ability to struggle with writing and making letters by utilization of the computer. So it speeds up the way they write, and their thinking then moves faster. So there's many, many issues that probably goes beyond the scope of what we're talking about here today. But yeah, I understand the vision. I understand the need for it. And I also understand the realities of the funding for it. So if you look at Nevada Ready, $50 million across the state over 2 bienniums, I mean, that's not a whole lot of money. So do we do a pilot here of this? Do we do a pilot there of this? Do we do a pilot here? What do we do? And I think that you have to examine, which you pretty much have a long understanding of already, the top of the line instructional utilization of computers for instruction, different than utilization for innovation, in my opinion. So we're looking at several different categories that children would utilize through their career. Well, does that fasten into the business community? I mean, there's all different ways to look at all of these things. So I think that we need more information before we could ever make a decision on that.
Okay, I think you got this enough,
Right, all right,
go forth and get it done.
right.
Okay, we're going to point 6.06. Discussion and possible action to retain the professional services of a consultant to oversee a procedure to obtain community input to ascertain the desired characteristics of a person to be selected as a permanent superintendent for the Washoe County School District, commencing immediately on an independent contractor basis upon terms and conditions to be described in an appropriate written agreement.
Good afternoon, President, Mayor, Interim Superintendent Davis, and members of the board. I'm Dawn Huckabee, Chief Human Resources Officer. At the last board meeting on April 14th, the board gave clear direction that you would like staff to seek consultants to bring back to this meeting today for the possibility of discussion and possible action to hire a consultant, to outreach to the community, to get community input on the characteristics for our next superintendent. It's very clear that the board values community input in this process, and so as such, we went out, we contacted 6 consultants and asked for a proposal with 6 characteristics that we were looking for to develop this process for community input. And so the 6 criteria that we were looking at was to develop a superintendent profile, which would be those characteristics that the community is looking for in our superintendent of Washoe County School District. Also to develop surveys in English and in Spanish, to outline a process for the distribution of those surveys into our community to get a wide breadth of feedback, to present to the board around what that process would look like, discuss with the board and get input from the board on that process. Then to also bring back a final report to the Board of Trustees with the compilation of the data, the analysis, and the results of that information, and also, of course, what the costs associated with that process would be. So as we reached out to 6 different consultants, due to time constraints and resources, there was one consultant firm that came back with a proposal that was submitted, and that is Simon and Associates. And so in your board documentation that you have the actual outline proposal from Simon and Associates that details for each of those 6 criteria that we established what the task would be associated with those criteria to bring before the board for discussion. So what I would like to first discuss with the board today is get direction from the board on how you would like to move forward with the possibility of hiring a consultant to do this work.
Anyone have any input into this?
On the presentation?
Yeah, or onto
Right.
this whole process. Did you have some input? No, you're drinking it. Okay. You know, I gotta say, I like this proposal, and it sounds like what we should be looking for and finding the characteristics for a superintendent. And it's, to me, it covers everything that I could think of. And I'm really pleased with this particular proposal. Is that what, okay, yes. Yes.
President Mayor, this might be the appropriate time for me to make this disclosure. Before we take any action in connection with the item, I wanted to make a public disclosure. For many years, I have been personally and professionally acquainted with Katie Simon and Simon & Associates, whose business has now made this proposal. As the Washoe County manager, I consider her to have been a mentor to me, as she was also to whom I reported for several years. and a good personal friend. And subsequent to my employment with the county, her consulting business and my consulting business have collaborated on some consulting business contracts. I want to emphasize that she and I do not currently have any active contracts or formal business relationships, so I don't, under these circumstances, believe I have a conflict of interest between me as a member of this board and her consulting business, so that might require me to recuse myself. So I believe I can be a part of this discussion and vote.
I think she can, since she disclosed, right?
That's an appropriate disclosure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Anyone else have?
I think it's comprehensive. Yeah, I think it's a comprehensive way to get feedback back and breaking down the areas when you're dealing with the questions, and then when you're getting actually even interviews from stakeholders in the community. It's pretty comprehensive. So, like that.
Yes.
President Mayor, I have a question for staff, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, Ms. Huckabee, or if Ms. Payne can answer this question. So when we did our survey for the strategic plan, what did that cost us?
I mean, we used in-house talent, so obviously staff time, and we used in-house printing services. We delivered the surveys to the schools ourselves, so, you know, I can't actually quantify a figure in terms of how much it cost. It was staff time.
And did we use SurveyMonkey, or how was the survey?
We did, and we also used printed cards for those that really needed to write. So yes, we used.
The survey itself is.
Your name?
I'm sorry, Charles Ron from the Communications Department, for the record. For the survey, though, we used our new website platform. SchoolWire has built-in functionality, and we use that. In fact, really, SurveyMonkey shouldn't be used in the district anymore because we have it built in.
So, well, explain that a little bit more, because we're not all techies.
So
I'm still using SurveyMonkey.
So when the school district launched our new website, it came with just a huge collection of new features, and one of those is a really robust survey and forms tool that allows any of us really to develop great surveys. Without having to use another software. It's something available to all departments, schools, and staff.
Any other questions or comments?
I do have one.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Under task 2.1, I don't know if you have the same one I have open. It says info search, on and on and on. The online survey will be approved by the board president and vice president in a noticed public subcommittee meeting. So it sounds like we're going to have a subcommittee, which would then have to be under open meeting law, right?
It would be noticed either way. Even if not, it would be noticed.
I thought we were just trying to avoid any.
It will be noticed, but it won't. You know, we have them like tomorrow. We have one where the three of the leadership get together, and we just notice it that we'll be making a decision on the survey, and we can have it in here, and the public can come.
I'm wondering if it would be helpful for, excuse me, President Mayor, if it would be helpful for us to hear more about, I know initially the question that Dawn asked us was about how we wanted to move forward, whether we wanted to move forward with a consultant. And I know we've started talking about the actual proposal. I'm just wondering if it would be helpful to have a presentation on the proposal. It sounds like there's.
I thought she was going to be here.
They are here.
Okay,
They're
good.
here. So
Come
if
on
you have
up and
questions,
if
or
she can speak to her proposal.
more than
Can we
happy
have
to
you just
help.
make your proposal?
Talking about people as if they're not even in the room.
Good.
That's rude.
Thank you, Mr. President, trustees, interim superintendent. For the record, Katie Simon Holland, Simon and Associates. So I'm happy to answer your questions, or if you would like me to go through the quick presentation, we can do that.
Would that be okay?
Okay. Okay.
Katie, do you want to just hit this one to move forward?
And I also want to introduce Sarah Hart from InfoSearch International. Sarah is the research professional who is part of the team. And Sarah and I both feel if you want to do this process differently, if you want to add and subtract tasks, we're absolutely fine with that. If you wanted to do the survey, design it internally, Sarah's fine with that. We just wanted to be responsive to your need to be inclusive and get community input. So we welcome your direction, and we're wide open for suggestions. So one important point just to start off with is that our understanding of the purpose of the process was to cast the widest possible net and to provide an opportunity for the widest possible group of folks to be able to participate in the process. So we designed this around that, and I wanted to make clear that this is not a survey to get majority or statistically representative sample of opinion. That would be a different process. Sarah can talk about that if you want. That is a more expensive process. Then you have to validate, you have to retest. It would cost significantly more. But that is a choice point for you in this process. So we've designed this around encouraging inclusiveness and everyone having an opportunity to participate. We start with a process of interviews with board members and key stakeholders or key staff members that you would identify so that we can build that profile of what are the highest priority characteristics of the ideal candidate for your next superintendent. There may be 500 qualities and characteristics that people might list, but we want to hear from the board and from whoever you tell us to interview to get that profile identified. And then that would become the basis of a survey. And again, InfoSearch would build that survey, and they have a tremendous amount of experience, including experience with the school district doing surveys for you. We want to have the majority of the responses be available online because, of course, tabulating it is much easier when it's online. But we also would make available a paper and pencil version as your staff so appropriately did for your survey about the strategic plan. We would need the district's help in translating into Spanish. Neither of us have the capacity to do that in an appropriate manner, so we would need your help on that. We would also need your help in accessing email lists that the school district has so that we can distribute it widely. And part of my job would be to work with media and other partners to make sure that we can get that survey out to folks. Certainly it would be available on your website. And again, as your staff did, Washoe County Libraries, other facilities where community members and families are present. We would propose that the key process points be approved in open meeting, including the survey itself being approved by the entire board. Question came up about the use of a subcommittee, and the notion there was have the ability to make decisions in a more nimble fashion than trying to find dates when all 7 of you can be present to make decisions. We know that time is important to you and that you do want to have this process concluded in as expeditious a manner as possible, but we would still want to have, if you have subcommittees, we would still want to have them in open meetings so that everybody knows everything that's going on. Because of your meeting schedule, we would target the process to be completed no later than June 23rd. That is a regular meeting for you. I understand you do have policy meetings on the alternating Tuesdays. We want to make sure that InfoSearch has the opportunity to do a good job of tabulating the results. We want to have the survey open for about 3 weeks and then give them time to do their tabulation. Sarah can comment, but she has identified she can't, based on their schedule and their work that they already have underway, she can complete the tabulation by the 16th of June, which is a meeting date for you. But we want to make sure that the results are publicly available so that people can see them before the meeting. So we would propose that it would be a June 23rd completion date for presentation at a regular board meeting. So this next slide is just the draft timeline. Would propose to begin doing interviews with folks that need to be met with this coming week. Back to you for approval of the survey at the May 12th board meeting. We would have the survey open from the 18th of May through the 5th of June. provide a board update to you the 26th of May during that time frame, just to let you know how things are going. Tabulating those survey results from the 5th through the 16th, and then again reporting the results in the board's public meeting on June 23rd. Sarah took a shot at some sample survey questions, and again, these are the kinds of survey questions we would use, but these are not the survey questions. We would, again, want to build that survey based on the highest priority qualities, characteristics, and skills that we hear from members of the board and key stakeholders. These are the kinds of things. And rather than just saying, we want the person to have these 5 skills, this would be proposed to be actually rank ordering, so that you would hear from the community, these are the things in rank order that we feel are most important. And again, we would put them in areas, things like areas of expertise, specialized skills, and then personal characteristics. We also would recommend that you have open-ended questions or a question. And one that Sarah suggested, which I thought was a great question, if you could ask the candidates for superintendent only one question, what would it be? So again, getting at those open-ended questions. I do want to note that in developing the proposed cost for the project, if you have one or more open-ended questions, InfoSearch has asked that there be a $500 additional cost for that, just because they have to compile all those verbatim responses and produce them for you. They also suggested an additional cost to have online, and Sarah, you may have to explain to me what InfoSearch wanted to do with online reports. I did speak with David Line from InfoSearch, and Sarah and I haven't talked about it in detail, but the notion of online reporting would be that results reporting would be real time, and people would see what the results were so far. And that would require that they have to build some other software capacity into their reporting. If you don't do that online reporting, we would still provide, of course, the results to be reported on your website and other public forums.
I agree.
And then just some questions for you all to consider. Are you comfortable with the process that's outlined? Are there changes you would like to see? Anything you want to do differently? And certainly not for answering today, but for thinking about, as we move forward, how will the resulting input be used? By what process will you move into the next phase of this process? I appreciated Trustee McClory's comment earlier about thinking about the outcomes before you begin, and I'm one that I like the Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. So be thinking about how you would want to use that resulting input. Let us know if there are any special populations you would like us to make a particular effort to engage. And if you wish to utilize the subcommittee, just want to make sure we're copacetic with Mr. Malloy on how that subcommittee would be appointed, and any other questions. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? You know, I want to state, though, I hate the running tabulation, because then some people, they look at that tabulation and they think in their mind, oh, I don't want to be different than the majority, and so they vote with whatever one's a leading point, I think.
I agree with you, Mr. President. I think it can skew the results. Mm-hmm.
Any other points or questions? Yes, Lisa.
I have a couple of points. Well, one, since this is one of the most important things we do, I think it should be all of the trustees that are having input. I think we need to make that commitment as trustees to come together when you're having these so-called subcommittee meetings. I would like to have a say and participate in that. And then also, I'm concerned about, I think it's a good idea to have a consultant to oversee this process. It's not the first time we've done this. We did an evaluation of our superintendent at a survey. We sent out a survey of our superintendent for his last evaluation, and that was done with a consultant overseeing that process and with our internal staff. So I'm looking at the cost of, and no offense to the, I'm looking at the cost, and my question is, I'm trying to find it. For the info search international, $8,500, and I'm wondering, could we use our internal process, because we paid for that website to have those things, to do the survey process? And would there be any opposition to that by the trustees?
Well, yes.
The only question I would have in terms of our system not being familiar with our system in comparison to the InfoSearch system would be the way the proposal's been described, and which I like, is the rank ordering of the criteria rather than just voting on a particular set of criteria, the rank ordering. So I don't know if our system, and so Charlie's going to check, but just to kind of look at that in terms of functionality, that would be my only question to help make that decision.
Good point.
And also our staff capacity. I mean, that's the other question I would ask, is our staff capacity to be able to manage the search process with our system right now.
Yes, Mr. Rosenberg.
I've made my feelings abundantly clear, but just one other thing. I think it needs to be outside. I think it's one of the things that is really important, that no one can ever say that we rigged it or anything like that.
And I was just
I don't love to spend the money, but...
I was going to add that same thing, that there's a level of, just a level of distance from us that I think as a whole, to have the highest level of credibility and that's part of the reason of getting it, of asking outside consultants to be a part of the process from the beginning, is let's have the highest level of credibility in this so we can have the most robust community conversation about this, if you will.
Yes.
Mr. President, if I can just make one clarification. Based on the schedule of the board meetings, it would be my recommendation that we bring the survey to the entire board for you to approve. So in the initial presentation, based on timing, I had thought maybe we could save some time by having a subcommittee. But because of the dates of the board meeting and when the survey would be available, we can bring it to the entire board. The only thing that I had proposed that we take to a subcommittee, I think that's still in there, is approval of the list of people to interview. And certainly all of you can provide input to the list of who to interview, but because time is of the essence, we probably don't want to interview 100 people, so we have to make decisions about who would be in and who would be out of that list, and I would want guidance from at least a subcommittee of the board, but you could all have input.
And you can look at our schedule of meetings, but there's nothing to prevent us from having a special committee meeting, especially because if we wanted to, we could have one the day after our regular meeting or something like that. So.
Well, if we're going to keep to the schedule as proposed, we would need to complete interviews with folks around the 8th of May. So we'd have to have a meeting pretty quickly to approve a list.
Yeah.
And maybe there's another way, that council can suggest that we could approve a list, but
Well, and you can make public comment if you fill out a card.
Just a second.
Oh, okay.
Just a second. Yes.
To answer Katie's question, it seems to me that if you want to appoint a subcommittee of some kind to facilitate this proposal, you could do so in, consistent with this agenda item as part of it, is what I wanted to say. And if you want to think about how that committee's might be composed, you could make your motions in connection with this proposal that she has presented and make that a part of it if you wish.
And Mr. President, the other thing we could do is find a date that works and notice it as a possible quorum of the board, and whoever can get there can be there.
Yeah. Yes.
Just one comment. I hear a lot that time is of the essence. I think that for some people time is of the essence. For me, time is a little less of the essence, and getting it right is more of the essence. So I'm not committed to having these results and all of that done by June 23rd. If it's July 23rd, we can look at other options as to what we would need to do to possibly extend the superintendent's contract. But getting it right is of the essence. I'm okay with it taking more time. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I mean, I want to move a little gingerly as opposed to quickly.
Okay. Yes.
I'm Sarah Hart, Director of Research at InfoSearch, and I wanted to actually address your point, which I think is a very good one, in clarification of the dollars that would be allocated to InfoSearch. Perhaps half of that is for the IT, the building of the survey and having that IT service. But the other half really is analytical in terms of staff. And so, for instance, if you wanted to see if there was a statistically significant difference between business leaders and parents, or between any other groups, between men and women, or any other groups that you want to look at, that's part of what we do, is we look at statistically significant differences and bring that to the table. So if we stepped out of it, you may, in fact, have folks here who can do that. But I would ask that you would, to cover yourselves, make sure that you did have that internally as well.
And I would just add, just in response to Trustee Smith, I absolutely agree. And Trustee Ruggiero, this is the single most important thing that we do. And we certainly want to exercise our due diligence. But I do think that we have to be sensitive to the length of time. Usually a school year starts July 1, and we have staff members in kind of a limbo situation, whether they're teachers or they're administrators and parents and all of that. So although I would not compromise, I wouldn't give up getting it right for getting it done expeditiously. But I think if we can get it done expeditiously while getting it right, we should.
Okay. Oh.
For the record, Charles Ron from the Communications Department. Just to point out, we do have the technologically we could do ranking, but there is no way to prevent school district staff from seeing or possibly modifying results of this survey.
That's why we're going outside.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Charles.
Okay, sir, I have down here 4 different things you want to talk about, so.
That was an old card.
Oh.
Good afternoon. I want to thank
For your name, please.
President Mayer, Interim Superintendent Davis, and members of the board, as well as the audience. It's been a long day. I did have quite a few questions, but I think I've distilled.
Could you identify yourself?
Sure. My name is Jay Johnson. I am a strategy and innovation consultant. I've worked in executive development, change management, organizational development, and more recently I set up the MIT, in concert with MIT in Cambridge, a mentorship program for entrepreneurs here in Reno.
Fantastic.
So really I asked, probably it's a question of clarification, and that is with regard to your second bullet, I think on your second page, which was stakeholders. And I think why someone saw me with sort of the nervous foot action back here was I'm concerned that if stakeholders are sort of within Washoe County School District, the organization, I think we need to get stakeholders outside of that, a fresh perspective. And I'm wondering if you could provide some clarification on that. Were you looking at stakeholders outside of Washoe County School District?
Yes.
Thank you again for the record, Katie Simon Holland. Yes, and I think that the school board has been very diligent in its emphasis on getting community input. So certainly it would be my recommendation and my intention that a stakeholder group would include people from outside, economic development folks, chamber, other folks that would be from the community.
Thank you. And does that mean that you'd be looking to have their input as far as developing the actual online survey? You can look at it.
Katie Simon Holland. Yes, the process that's proposed is to interview some folks, and we can interview folks as a group as well, but to provide some folks that we want to hear from, obviously all of the trustees, people who have a particular role, perhaps parent-teacher organization leaders, et cetera, and then use that profile information to develop the survey based on what we hear from this group of folks are the highest priority qualifications, characteristics, experience, we would not exclude other input. So there would be an opportunity for people to say, I don't care about any of those things. I care about, does this person have a strategy for improving graduation rates? So that would be the intention, is to help have that input, develop a profile, have that profile inform the survey.
I'm sorry, and I don't mean to take up much time. My concern about this is confirmation bias. So in other words, if you have mostly just people that are involved with the organization determining the survey, you can get the answers that you want to get. So my concern is actually at the earliest possible stage that you involve stakeholders from the community. And I might add that it might even be good to have a subcommittee that's not entirely comprised of people from the board, but actually get people involved in the community. I know it's an ambitious goal given the fact that you have such a short period of time. But again, going back to what someone else said earlier, if we don't do it right this time, I mean, I think it'll be a high price to pay for both our students and our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Smith.
Katie, you mentioned that you were going to try to work with some of the media outlets, and kind of just working off of what the gentleman was speaking about is you kind of give us a rough overview of what you would try to do as far as marketing. Can you dive in a little bit more on how you try to market the survey? I think that would help me understand, as well as the gentleman in the audience, the strategy.
Certainly. Thank you, Trustee Smith. Of course, getting the word out to folks is always the biggest challenge. And, you know, I spent 15 years as the Washoe County manager and developed a lot of wonderful relationships in that process, and invariably heard, well, nobody asked me,
Yeah.
and I didn't know about the survey. So, yes, it would be absolutely going to nonprofit organizations, to Boys and Girls Club, to Girl Scouts, to Boy Scouts, to parent organizations, to EDAWN, WIN, the Chamber, the Human Services Network, the Latino community, to all of those folks, and certainly many of those folks I have relationships with, and many that I don't, I will, to make sure that we engage folks in helping us to drive people to the survey, either a pencil and paper version or to the online version. So is that responsive to your question, sir?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think, too, to some degree, some of the ownership of getting the survey out there, you know, lies on the 7 of our shoulders, too. Is when we're out there, when this survey is out there, I just challenge myself anyways to say, hey, take our survey, let us know this is your time, right? We're doing this the right way, but it's only as good as the people who help us do it. If not too many people do it, our survey responses are kind of, you know, meager, right? So my personal challenge would be, hey, when we're out there, when it's ready, you know, really push it.
And Mr. President, if I might, one of the last projects of this magnitude I collaborated with Sarah Hart and InfoSearch International on was the United Way selection of their vision process. I was the consultant on that project as well. And Sarah, I believe we had thousands of responses. I believe we had on the order of 4,000 responses to that. So
that was out there.
It was out there.
Yeah, that was out there.
So we would intend to do the same kind of media push.
And I would also add, I mean, Irene and her team do a tremendous job,
Absolutely.
and we would continue to look for her leadership in those avenues that are already established, to get those out there as well. So, I mean, this book is a result of the kind of work that they've done and the kind of comments and feedback that they've done. So I think you put those together, then we're looking at something pretty robust.
You know, too, this isn't her first rodeo. She's done many surveys in her 15 years as county manager for Washoe County. I was always envious because Sparks didn't do as good a job as they did on surveys. Yes.
No, I just wanted to make a comment about the process. I think we had initially, and I think it's even an agenda item, started thinking about a survey with a very simple question. I think this adds another step in the process that has us be more intentional about the questions we ask and what we ask. So I think just taking that step adds another level of intentionality as well as involvement. So I like the way that that's been structured. I think the challenge for us and the choice point we have to make, which I'm hearing from Ms. Simon, is the decision around who do we involve and how to do it quickly so we can get the survey launched within the next 2 weeks. So I think that's going to be the challenge for us to figure out how to create that list and approve that list. So I think that's what I'm hearing is the first step if we're going to go in this direction.
Well, the first step is to decide if we're going to go in this direction.
Exactly, yes. I said the if, yeah.
Lisa Ruggerio's been holding her hand up for half an hour now.
Thank you, President Mayor. The good news is we have that list because we have great relationships with our community stakeholders, and we have a wide range, and Irene could pull that list up for us in 5 minutes. So I'm not sure we have a very extensive, exhaustive list of key stakeholder community members, from the Ed Alliance to everyone you mentioned, the Chamber, EDON, faith-based organizations, our Latino partners, our parent advocates groups from GTAC. So we really, really have a very extensive list already developed because we use it all the time, So.
Do we have a motion, Mr. Rosenberg? A motion?
No, not yet. I mean no disrespect to anyone. I am sick to death of hearing of stakeholders. The only stakeholders we have are our children. There's nothing else that exists, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think they're going to have a thing to say about this. But I do think that it is important that we get as broad a range as we possibly can. That means we need to get grassroots to the parents of these kids, all of them, particularly the ones that don't usually respond to this kind of thing. That's what I would hope for.
Okay.
So I'll make the motion.
Okay.
May I?
Yes, you may.
I have one change.
Oh,
So,
whatever.
that we don't have a subcommittee, that we just do it as an entire board. Are people interested in that process?
Well, make the motion, we'll see.
Well, I just maybe ask, because I see what you're saying. There was a way that you said it, that kind of gave us so we said it and but it didn't tie our hands if it happened to be a time when.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Just one suggestion would be that, and as you said, you have huge lists. So the process of culling down 15 to 20 people that would be interviewed in order to help build this profile in this survey. I can interview 50 people if you want, but I know you want to make sure we focus and concentrate. So the suggestion was that we schedule a meeting that at least the president could attend and anyone else of the board, and we set it, notice it, and set it as a possible quorum of the board so that any board members who can and wish to attend that meeting could do so.
Okay.
You want to do it?
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if I can remember all.
Look what she said, huh?
Yeah. Okay, so I move that the Board of Trustees contracts with Simon Associates for the services of conducting a survey in regard to the characteristics to be found in the next superintendent for the Washoe County School District, that we are not appointing a subcommittee, that we're noticing the meeting as a public meeting for the Board of Trustees. That would be the only change that I would ask for in the proposal.
That a quorum may be possible and may not be possible, because if we set a date of the 9th and all you guys are
And only 3 of us can make it,
surfing and only 3 can make it, you see what I'm saying?
Well, I will challenge all my trustees to make it, so, okay.
Is there a second to her motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal.
No.
Okay, let the record show that it's 6-1. Mr. Rosenberg voting in the negative. And it carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along to 6.08, presentation and discussion on past research for advertising on school buses and delivery vehicles for discussion and possible action. Tom and crew.
You did so 607.
Huh?
We need
Was
to
it
do
that-
607.
Wasn't that just 607?
No, that was 60. But isn't 607 moot now?
President Mayor?
Yeah.
So, based on the discussion we just had on 6.06, what I'm wondering is, and I'll direct this to Mr. Malloy as well, is this something that the board would like to bring back in terms of the specifics on that survey, given the discussion we've just had? And if so, Mr. Malloy, do we pull this for a future board meeting?
Well, I tend to agree with Trustee Taylor that it's somewhat moot, given what the action that you just took in regard to the consultant, Katie Simon's group. I presume that she would work with staff to work these issues out. If there's another issue that needs to come before the board, you can try to do that in a later time. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
So then do we just skip it then, is that what, or do we?
No, we need a motion to make it mute, don't we?
No, I mean, you don't have to,
Don't
if
have
you
to,
wish
yeah.
to not address, unless board members want to have discussion on this particular item separately, so be it. But if they don't, if there's no appetite for that, you don't have to even have it go any further. You can just move to the next item.
Is there any appetite to discuss 607? Lisa?
I'm sorry.
Oh, do you want to discuss 607? It's kind of, your motion has been, took care of it.
Well, I'm okay discussing it.
Okay, so we've got 6-1.
You didn't vote. You just only have one
Yeah.
trustee that wants to do it. Is there somebody else that wants to do it? And if so, maybe you should do it.
I think that if Lisa wants to say something on 6.07, I think on this type of decision, it only should take one of us. So I'd be okay if Lisa has something.
I would just say that 607 says that we approve the proposed survey, which is attached, and we just approved the process to develop a survey. And so it really makes us, if we approve 07, then it contradicts what we did in 06.
It's superfluous.
We don't need it.
President Mayor?
Yes.
Which is why I'm wondering if this would be a future agenda item, since we're going to come back with, after meeting with stakeholders, come back with the survey at a regular board meeting.
But there is a survey attached to this that is proposed, and we're not going to go back to that survey.
Right, so
have a
this
new
would not be
survey.
for today. We would have a new agenda item for a future board meeting to discuss the survey.
But it's a different survey.
Different
So
survey.
Yeah. But, okay, Lisa, go ahead and say what you want to say.
I'm confused.
Okay.
Okay, let's start with that.
Okay, so I thought, is the question on the board, do we want to hear this agenda item or not?
Do you want to discuss 607?
Well, I think let's take 5 minutes and discuss this, or is that going to conflict with what we're
Okay.
doing?
Okay, we're going to,
Oh, it does? Yeah. Well, then why was it put on the agenda this way?
Because we didn't know what we're going to do with the new survey.
Gotcha. Okay, that's fine.
if it would have passed without your amended motion, then we would have had to discuss this, but with your amended motion, it doesn't seem necessary, but we'll discuss
Okay,
it.
that's fine with me.
With the attorney.
Mr. President, if there's no appetite to hear this agenda item separately, then the chief of staff has suggested
Put him right up there.
a bulletproof way to deal with this, and that would be to move to take it off the agenda and see if they get a second and go from there.
Is there a motion to remove it from the?
So moved.
agenda?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Let the record show it passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay. 6.08, presentation and discussion on past research for advertising on school buses and delivery vehicles for discussion and possible action. Tom and the whole tribe.
Right.
Well, they were talking about tribe for bicycles, huh? You all could ride your bicycle. Oh, no, Pete's got to stay off of bicycles.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, he does.
Not related to this agenda item. So, President Mayor, Interim Superintendent Davis, members of the board, students, Representative Carlson. For the record, Tom Szynski, Chief Financial Officer, and with me are my distinguished colleagues, our Chief Operating Officer, Pete Etchard, our Transportation Director, Rick Martin, and our Chief Communications and
Community Engagement
Officer.
The
Thank you,
longest time for
Irene
that.
Payne, our friend from England.
Yes.
So, at the request of Trustee Smith, I think at a previous board meeting that I wasn't in attendance, but there was a question about what research that we had done with regard to advertising on either school buses or district vehicles. And back in 2008, we all recall, was the start of the great economic recession in our lifetime. And moving through that process, in about 2010-11, we went through a very exhaustive process of evaluating whether advertising on school district buses and or vehicles would be an option to consider for the school district as a means of raising additional revenue during a time when we were making fairly significant budget reductions or cuts to balance our budget. And through that process, that went through a many-month process, almost nearly a year, we reached out to the Regional Transportation Commission, to national companies, to parents. We got legal advice, and we also worked with the Department of Education to see if that would be feasible for us to engage in looking into advertising on our buses and or vehicles. And so as part of that process today, we've provided the board the exhaustive research in your board item, and I do mean exhaustive. I mean, there's a whole binder full with the stuff, and I think you got a majority of it to show you all the research that was done on this effort. And so what we'd like to do is kind of reach out to you and talk about 3 key reasons why we didn't go down that path. And so Rick is going to start out by talking about safety concerns with regard to our buses, and then Pete is going to follow up with some First Amendment considerations, and then Irene's going to follow up with regard to parents and ultimately why the revenues didn't really make this worth the effort. So at this juncture, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Martin, who's going to take us through safety.
For the record, Rick Martin, Director of Transportation. Back in 1939, this goes way back, there was a consortium, of national consortium of what to do with safety on the buses. And it was determined at that time that a color that should be used would be yellow. That color has been kept up to this current date. So when you're in Milwaukee, you see a yellow school bus. When you're in Los Angeles, you see a yellow school bus. And that was all based on the aspect of safety. Now, during that time, a number of other safety issues have come into play, and a number of other aspects have been added, like you see a bus that has like 250 mirrors on it. Well, it's a safety feature. I'm embellishing, of course, but there's still quite a few mirrors. They have a unique flashing warning system now. You've been there, you stop at a stop, and the back of the bus is lighting up like a Christmas tree and going back and forth and all of that. That's a safety issue. Stop signal arms, the stop sign that comes out, another safety issue. All of these things have come across for all of that time, including to the point now where there is yellow reflective tape around exits, around windows. All of those things are determined. So that's all safety features that have been brought about for the school bus and is required by federal standards. Now, in addition to that, from our standpoint as a state, we have inspections twice a year by the Nevada Highway Patrol. Those highway patrol inspections are for safety features. So oftentimes when we get, when we're inspected, we're missing reflective tape. There's a problem with the lighting. You know, fortunately, not all of our buses have gone from yellow to white, but you know, those are types of issues that come forward and they bring that out.
again, for safety issues. And then from that standpoint, from the safety aspect of the advertising, where that came in is because of the concept of the yellow bus, keeping that standard and having those federal regulations abided by. We looked at that aspect of what would the advertising be able to be done on the buses. Now, we cannot go put a wrap based on these standards on a bus, a school bus. We can't put "got milk" all the way over your bus. No, can't do it. So what we could allow would be a small portion on the back corner of the panel of the buses, and that's been nationally determined, but like a 3x5 piece on the very back end of the back quarter panel. And that would cause a number of distractions, because again, where the eye is drawn. Same thing with the advertising concept is, you know, they're marketers. Color. Color is a very vibrant way to get somebody's attention. So, and, you know, so you've got this big yellow school bus with black, and then somebody wants a big red 3x5 sign. So where's your eye going to be drawn to the 3x5 sign? So those aspects all came into play with, those are safety features. Now, the National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportations came out with a position paper back in 2011 on the subject. They are adamantly opposed to advertising on the buses from the fact that it is a distractive piece with safety issues. So, at this point, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Eckert.
I'll be real quick here, but the item that I was going to bring up was just a bit in regards to content, and specifically First Amendment issues regarding the content and viewpoint being expressed in the advertising that we could have on buses. We are currently considered a non-public forum, which can to an extent restrict the type and content of advertisements, but there are continually First Amendment cases regarding advertising policy. And timing be what it is, I don't know if a lot of you saw this advertised on the internet last week, but a New York judge ruled just last week that the New York Transit Authority must accept a very, very controversial Muslim Jewish advertising on their buses based on the First Amendment. So the bottom line is, when it comes to advertising, I mean, we can try to restrict the advertising that we have on our buses, but if it gets challenged, we would be in for a fight, and whether we could keep the advertising off our buses, you know, there's no saying, but we would definitely spend time and effort if someone challenged on wanting to have what we would consider a controversial advertising on the buses.
Okay. For the record, Irene Payne. So to kind of lead off what the two gentlemen have just said, when we looked at this last time, the concern was around who would advertise on our buses. And although we could put really clear criteria in place, parent groups came out in force to express not only their concern around the safety, because advertising is meant to distract, it's meant to grab the eye, otherwise it's not effective, but also around the content of the adverts and how we would restrict that to it being very appropriate for children and school buses. So that was a huge issue. And then we looked at the cost benefit. We would have to look at staffing, finding a position to actually manage the advertising, because you'd actually be selling media space on our vehicles, on our buses, and there would be contracts to be drawn up. There would be having to follow up on those contracts. So when we looked at actually having to staff that position, and we looked at the revenue that may be generated, the cost benefit didn't work out. So then when we presented that to the board at that point overwhelmingly said, yeah, this doesn't really work out for us as a school district.
So back for the record again, Tom Szynski. So I think the point of this discussion is that we went through a very robust process. As a finance person, yay, I found an idea to generate money, but then when you dig deeper and look at the details, I think the consensus was, after all of this work, that it just wasn't feasible. So at this juncture, I think we'll turn it back over to the board, because basically our board item is, what would you like us to do next?
Nick has something.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
I just wanted to be known for the record that the reason I wanted to have this presentation was, A, I wasn't here several years ago, and B, it wasn't so much for the point of selling advertising as much as advertising the district's own successes. So I never wanted a presentation really to talk about the pros and cons of creating a position and selling advertising, but more as a way for us to reach more of our students and our parents in the district, or other people in the district, just as a way to support, you know, we are WCSD and stuff like that. Just for the record, I'm not for selling beer on a school bus.
Good to
I
know.
am.
Good
We
to
can make
know.
a
Good to
fortune.
know. You mean actually on the bus? Or?
On the side of the.
Oh.
But I appreciate the presentation. I'd like to learn more about some of the safety elements. And I guess what rings in my mind is it all that much different, the safety elements of public transportation versus a school district? I know there are certain things that school buses have, like we have the thing that sticks out so the bus driver can see the kid has to pass within their vision. We have the stop signs that come out when the bus doors open and the bus is stopped. Public transportation is doing it, and I would think that they look at some of the same safety measures and precautions that we would take, but I could be wrong, I don't know.
And I'll address that. They do look at those aspects, but they also, if you look at public transportation, their concept is also much different than ours. Ours is neighborhood stops. Ours isn't, you know, we have multitudes of stops throughout the day. I mean, we do 1,800 runs a day. We probably have 10 stops minimum on each of those runs, so do the math. So, you know, where they're doing just a circular route where they might have 10 stops as a whole for, you know, 50 buses. We're talking 250 buses on a daily basis with that many routes. So the situation is there's that safety factor with those arms and putting the crossing arms out, and we've got those students, and you know, they're coming out of the bus, and all of a sudden they're heading across the street, you know, and that's why with the safety arms and all of that, and that's why the yellow bus is out and the flashing light, because they want to really make the awareness that there are kids in the neighborhood, there are kids getting out right now, and they may not be paying attention. You know, now the adults or even some of the people that are in a public transportation setting, you would hope they were paying attention.
Right.
So we won't go there.
May I,
So-
Mr. President? May I?
Yes.
Go ahead.
And we transport children. That's different between us and public transportation is we got to bus 68 kids versus 68 adults, usually.
Now I understand that. I'm just looking at the kids or adults, anybody's life is a life no matter the age. I'm just looking at the safety, like the different aspects that they would look at versus what we would look at.
Right, and there, you know, there's certain requirements that are in place for the school bus based on the safety of the children, as opposed to the public transit. Obviously, I mean, if you're up on, we're not going to park on South Virginia. We're not going to do our stops in South Virginia like they do with the public transit. That's just, you know, unacceptable from a safety standpoint for our children. And then we also don't have those rights to have some of those built-in loading zones and the like that they have. So it's a different animal in many, many different ways. It may still be, you know, a horse, but it may be a Palomino versus a Palooza, you know. So it's that kind of thing. So
yes,
I will say, just to concur with what Trustee Ruggiero said, certainly a life is a life, but a child is a little less apt to protect themselves, to watch, you know, as diligently, because they're a kid, they're in second grade, so the likelihood of them, you know, not seeing something coming is greater than an adult. And I think the second thing, I don't know how many of you have seen this, but over the past 24 hours, there's been media coverage of a car that drove right by. Children were actually about to cross the street and get on a school bus, and an SUV drove right in front of those kids. And it was like on the shoulder of the street.
No, it was, the car was in the bike lane.
Yeah, it was exactly right there. And so the kids, and you could see it from the camera in the bus. So the school bus driver pulled up, opened the doors, and you could see 3 kids about to cross the street. And just before they stepped off the sidewalk, it was barely enough room, an SUV went speeding by. And this was in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to add, this is a really bad time for this to come for me, because I mean, another half a second, and those kids were children. They didn't see the car coming, you know, because their kids are getting on the school bus, you know, doing what they're doing. Their parents weren't very far away, but by the time the parents saw it, it was too late. So I don't want to add to the part that gets me is the distraction from the kids, whether it's a moneymaker, whether it's we have a great story to tell, and we do. Our schools do a tremendous job. I couldn't be more impressed with our staff. I keep saying that, but I don't want. This is a bad time for me to talk about adding to the distraction. Really, after seeing that. It really is.
Yeah, that car was so close, the girls' skirts flew in the wind.
Yeah, and that's how fast the car was going, and that's how close they were.
No, they're still looking.
Of course, the mother went running after the car, but she didn't catch it. That's as any good mother would.
Yes, I bet.
But no, they didn't. But it was pretty.
Wrap it up. So where are we headed with this?
Hey.
Well, I just wanted to hear some of the information and bring it so that all of us, because, Veronica wasn't here and.
Yeah, wasn't here.
Sorry.
I think it's a good idea to always revisit something like this, because, the situation changes, circumstances changes.
Yeah, that was my only intent, it's not to really take any action, but just to, I know it's worded for that, but really just to talk about it and kind of.
Yeah, I think it was good for us to revisit
Then
it to make sure.
Then we've discussed it enough for you? Okay. Let's go on to 6.10. Thank you. Discussion and preliminary approval of the process adoption of board policy 4505, standards of professional practice, and the proposed deletion of board policy 4117.1, evaluations, conflict of interest, for possible action. Don Huckabee.
Good evening, President, Mayor, Interim Superintendent Davis, and members of the board. I'm Dawn Huckabee, Chief Human Resources Officer, and before you is a brand-new policy, standards of professional practice. The purpose of this is to describe professional practice and standards of practice in Washoe County School District and set the expectations for our employees, our volunteers in our school district. And so what I'd like to do is just quickly go through it with you because it is brand new. I will tell you this is the second step of our three-step process, so it has been before our policy committee. It's been before our policy committee as well, and also vetted through our employee association. So all 5 employee associations have also weighed in. Oh, sorry. But it's board policy 4505, and it's that overarching standards of professional conduct. So within there are a few things I just want to outline with you. It talks about having neat, clean, professional appearance, and that clothing would not pose a potential health or safety hazard. We think that's very important in having a standards of conduct to have dress in there. It briefly outlines duties and responsibilities, but we know that duties and responsibilities change depending on the role that you serve in the district. So it just outlines basically that the superintendent and the chief human resources would implement the directives of the board in regards to responsibilities of personnel, and that supervision happens at the site and department level for those. It does talk about employee rights and freedom of expression. You'll see in there that there was slight modification to this when it went to the board policy, and makes clear that about staff members being able to have the freedom of expression. But when a staff member makes a public statement pursuant to the official duties, they're not speaking on behalf of themselves or as a citizen, but on behalf of the district. And that there's no absolute constitutional right to unlimited expressive purposes. We're always acting as an employee of the Washoe County School District. There's a piece in there about whistleblower protection so that employees understand that there is protections when you want to report anything that's happening. It talks about ethics and nepotism and conflict of interest, and that's why we're recommending the deletion of the conflict of interest in terms of evaluations, because it's encompassed overall in this policy here, so it's merged together. It also talks about culture of respect, which the board has adopted a culture of respect resolution in conjunction with our employee associations, but this embeds the culture of respect into the board policy itself. It goes into some definitions, and as an attachment you have the consanguinity chart with the 3 levels of consanguinity in terms of relationships that is aligned with the conflict of interest. And so it is, as I said, a new board policy, but we think is a very important policy to have. And I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions? Yes.
talked about this before in a policy committee meeting, and I think there's a little bit of debate, and we had asked for something, you had mentioned that,
This is what remember the definition of what is.
no. We were gonna get some examples, because you said that different schools have different things that they would give to their new teachers or teachers at the beginning of the year. So
The
we're gonna kind of get
handbooks?
some examples of like that.
We do have examples of handbooks, and what we looked at, that was in terms of dress that we were looking at those.
Exactly.
And what we found in the examples, and I brought some to the last board policy meeting, but I didn't distribute them, that most of those employee handbooks, their dress policy is to match the student dress policy. So whatever the dress code is for the students, the faculty and staff match that as well. And in speaking with Lisa Scurry, in terms of what that should look like for those handbooks, she discussed having a template to use that all schools could use to incorporate. Because one of the things that we did see when we were looking at those handbooks is that some are huge and have lots of information, and some are smaller and don't have as much information, and what's the right amount of information to have in those handbooks. So she's working on that as well, as to have a template.
Okay. That was my only question, sorry.
Any other questions? The chair will entertain a motion.
I move that the
Yes.
Board of Trustees provides preliminary approval to the proposed adoption of Board Policy 4505, Standards of Professional Practice, and the proposed deletion of Board Policy 4117.1, Evaluations, Conflict of Interest, and initiates the 15-day public review process.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same signal. Let the record show it was passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is 611. Discussion and preliminary approval of the proposed adoption of Board Policy 5041, Student Advisory Board to the Board of Trustees for possible action.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
For the record, Lisa Scurry, your policy coordinator. So the student advisory policy was actually only adopted in October of 2013. President Mayer had asked me to look at changing the meeting structure and responsibility from a minimum of 3 meetings a year to just a single meeting a year. In speaking with Mr. Carlson at the last meeting, what we kind of talked about was we'll have a minimum of 1 meeting, and then depending on what that student advisory board of that year decides what they want to do, they might ask for another meeting, they might present to the Board of Trustees at a regular meeting. It just leaves it open for them. But depending on the SOB or the board, it doesn't lock us into anything or make us every 6 months come back and ask you for changes to this policy. At the policy committee meeting last week, one change that, and hopefully, Mr. Mayor, I encompassed what you wanted, was that all meetings will be scheduled in consultation with the Student Advisory Board. So that was added.
These are our joint meetings.
Right.
Just to narrow it down to 1 meeting year with a joint meeting with the student advisory, but that doesn't mean you can't attend the student advisory, even though we have 2 wonderful advisors, but, okay?
Yeah.
And it would not impact those monthly meetings that the students already
Right.
have.
Exactly. They'll continue having monthly meetings. Any other questions?
I think Lisa's ready for the motion.
Is she? All right.
It's a good motion. So I'm
Okay.
ready for it. I move that the Board of Trustees gives preliminary approval to the proposed revision of Board Policy 5041, Student Advisory Board to the Board of Trustees, and initiates the 15-day public review process.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same signal. So carried. Let the record show it was unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, 701 has been pulled. I will go to item 801. Any requests for future agenda items? Yes.
I haven't heard from Paula Ward, so I'd kind of like to have her come to the board and just give us a presentation, since she's the auditor for the Board of Trustees.
She did.
He wasn't there.
He wasn't,
You missed the
I-
board.
he wasn't
I
at,
missed board reports, but, so I'm hoping maybe I could entertain her, or she could entertain us for 20 more minutes.
So exactly what do you want? Do you want the same report that she provided in the meeting? Like, she needs to know the scope of what
Yeah,
you're looking
That
for.
would be great, the same report with, and then maybe if there's anything new.
or could you meet with her
I can
individually?
meet with her individually, yeah, that's fine.
I just need to know so
d-
she knows what she's reporting
Yeah,
or
I can meet with her
presenting.
individually.
It probably would be better,
Yeah, then I could do that.
and then you can ask her. Okay? Any other items for the agenda?
I just want to follow up on the incline meeting. Are we looking at when we're going to hold a
Yeah.
board meeting incline?
We are, it's on our superintendent highlights, or whatever they're called, every Friday.
Just friendly reminder.
Our logistics manager was sick, so.
Okay.
Okay. Still on the list, I know, I do know that.
Yeah, see it on the list.
Anyone else have? Okay, public comment, I do have, and thank you for being so patient, sitting for hours. Sherry Early?
Yes, my name is Sherry Early, and I currently teach at Roygam Elementary School. And I'm here to speak on gratitude to Interim Superintendent Tracy Davis, John Mayer, President John Mayer, and members of the board and students. I'm retiring this June after 36 years of teaching. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to retire, but it seems it's time. Time to make room for a new generation of teachers who will mold and influence the future of our state. The nearer the end of the school year draws, the more I grapple with a great many emotions, the predominant one being gratitude. I'm grateful for the Washoe County School Board that hired me all those years ago and provided such a wonderful opportunity. It has been quite a journey. The classroom is such a varied social dynamic, an ever-changing laboratory of the human heart, mind, and spirit. You would be hard-pressed to find a more spirited bunch than a classroom of elementary students. Most of my career has been at Roygam Elementary School, though I spent a few years in the beginning at Libby Booth. I've taught thousands of students from K through 6 computers for the whole school to 1st grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and I currently teach 3rd grade. Some of my students have gone on to become doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, teachers, scientists, engineers, and parents of their own school-aged children. I would also like to thank each of my former students for being part of my journey. You've kept my spirit youthful all these years and taught me almost as much as I was able to teach you. I know that the lessons I've learned have been woven into the fabric of my life until they and I are but one colorful tapestry. I'm not sure I'll know what to do with myself come August and the time I would normally be putting up bulletin boards, sharpening pencils, and learning the names of my new students. Retirement is a new normal. I think I might forever feel a twinge passing by an office supplies store and seeing all those new school supplies. Perhaps my most challenging lesson of all will be adapting to life outside the classroom and looking for a new challenge. Whatever else I may become after retirement, I will always be a teacher, proudly. If I were to offer any pearls of wisdom to new teachers beginning their journeys, it would be to love what you do. It's a privilege. I know the world is changing. Education is changing. Don't be afraid of the change. You will face different challenges than I did. Rest assured, children are still the future of our world. They are bright and full of hope. Your place in their life, however brief it may be over the course of time, will leave its mark. 36 years has a way of flying along. I hope you may enjoy the ride ever so much as I have. Please treasure our most precious resource, the children of our great state. Thank you.
That was so beautiful. Beautiful. Would you do me a favor? I do B News on the web, and
Broadcast for our, it's for our board. It's our board newsletter.
yeah, it goes out to everybody, and I usually ask for guest columnists and put it in there. would you mind if you gave that to JJ, and I could put it, I'd like to use your name and everything,
I'll find my
and put
name.
it in my news board, B News.
Yes.
Because
Thank
that
you
was
so much.
absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you
And
very
I've been in your classroom, and I've been to Roy Gom, and you are going to get in your crown in heaven a big ruby in the front for what an outstanding teacher you are.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service to
Thank
our
you.
children.
And you probably will find other avenues to use your ability as a teacher.
Yes,
I hope so.
yeah, you
Good.
will.
I
Thank you
just
very
want to
much.
say thank you. Look this, so there you go.
That wasn't your.
Yeah, I know, but I just think the part about how much they teach us, you don't know until you get into the profession how much they teach us too, and how they influence us to grow as a professional in our rooms. So thank you for making that statement, because it is a powerful thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I wish you were my teacher. You're exactly what I loved
I
about my
probably was your
teachers.
teacher. and
No,
might
you
not
look like
remember.
you just graduated college.
It's so nice to see someone else.
You look way too young to have taught for 36 years.
What I was going to say, she
You
looks like
do.
she's 12.
I was her first grade teacher. I was. And look at how she turned out.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, when I, you know, back then I was just as pretty.
Oh, my heart.
Thank you so much.
But if you could give
Absolutely, thank you.
that to JJ, I'd appreciate it.
Awesome.
Okay.
And thanks for coming to do that. You didn't have to do that.
No,
really
she
didn't
sat
have
through
to do
that
that.
meeting and,
Man.
okay, any more public comment? Okay, next meetings, we have a meeting on Monday, May 4th,
Oh, yeah,
at
concurrent
the
The concurrent
County
meeting with
Commission Chamber
Commission.
with Reno City Council, Sparks, and the Board of Trustees. And we have our next regular meeting of the board is May 12th at 2 p.m. here.
Okay.
We are adjourned.